In this video, we're breaking down 2 hours of the most shocking Family Guy theories you never knew existed. Let's get started. First up, the show finally confirms it: there are infinite parallel Griffins, and somehow every single one manages to be worse than the last. Infinite parallel Griffins theory. On the 27th of September, 2009, Family Guy aired an episode that would fundamentally change how fans could interpret every single moment of the show that came before and after it. The episode was called Road to the Multiverse, and it was the first episode of Season 8. In this episode, Stewie built a remote control that could travel between different universes, and he used it to take Brian on a trip through multiple alternate realities. But this was not just another wacky adventure episode. The episode established something much bigger that fans have been thinking about ever since. At the start of Road to the Multiverse, Brian asked Stewie where he got a genetically modified pig from. Stewie explained that he got it from another universe, and then he told Brian about something called the multiverse theory. Stewie said the theory states that there are an infinite amount of universes that exist at the same time as ours on parallel dimensional planes. In each of these alternate universes, the reality is different than our own. Sometimes the differences are only slight, and sometimes they are quite radical. Then Stewie said something really important. He said the point is that every possible eventuality exists somewhere in the multiverse. This was not a throwaway line or a joke that the show forgot about later. The entire episode was built around this concept, and it showed Stewie and Brian visiting many different universes. They visited a universe where Christianity never existed, so humanity was 1,000 years more advanced. They visited a universe where everyone looked like they were in a Disney movie. They visited a universe where dogs ruled and humans were pets. They even visited a universe where everything was exactly like the real world, with real people instead of cartoon characters. The episode showed that all these different versions of reality existed at the same time in different places. The writers of Family Guy clearly understood what they were doing when they made this episode. David A. Goodman, who was an executive producer and a former writer for Star Trek Enterprise, played a key role in developing the episode. The production staff watched episodes of a science fiction show called Sliders before writing Road to the Multiverse. Sliders was a show about traveling between alternate universes, so the Family Guy team was deliberately drawing on established science fiction concepts about parallel realities. The episode won awards for its creativity. Greg Colton won a Primetime Emmy Award for Individual Achievement in Animation for storyboarding the episode at the 62nd Primetime Emmy Awards. Critics praised the episode for its storyline, its many cultural references, and its use of various animation styles. According to Nielsen ratings, over 10 million people watched it during its original airing in the United States. This was not some obscure episode that nobody saw. It was a major episode that won awards and got millions of viewers. Here is where things get really interesting for people who have been watching Family Guy for a long time. The show has been on the air since 1999, and during that time, many of the characters have changed dramatically. These changes are so big that fans have noticed them and talked about them constantly online. The most obvious example is Peter Griffin himself. In the early seasons of Family Guy, Peter was definitely stupid and made bad decisions, but he also cared about his family and usually meant well. He was similar to Homer Simpson in some ways, but he was not quite as dumb, and he seemed to actually love his wife and kids most of the time. But something changed around Season 8. Peter became much dumber than he used to be. His stupidity went from being funny and somewhat realistic to being so extreme that it seemed impossible. He also became more cruel and mean-spirited, especially toward his daughter Meg. In earlier seasons, Peter would sometimes stick up for Meg when other people were mean to her, even though he teased her too. In later seasons, Peter became one of the worst people to Meg, and he did truly horrible things to her without any real consequences. He went from being a lovable oaf who made mistakes to being someone who deliberately hurt people and seemed to enjoy causing chaos. Many fans have pointed out this change. Multiple websites and articles have documented how Peter went from a kind-hearted simpleton in seasons 1 through 7 to someone much worse in season 8 and beyond. The shift was so dramatic that some fans created separate entries for early Peter and late Peter on character analysis websites. They describe early Peter as a well-meaning father who made mistakes due to his stupidity, while late Peter is described as lacking empathy, being cruel on purpose, and acting more like a villain than a hero in many episodes. Brian Griffin also changed significantly over the years. In early seasons, Brian was the voice of reason in the Griffin family. He was smarter than Peter and tried to help him out of bad situations. He had some flaws, like drinking too much and being pretentious about his writing, but overall he was portrayed as one of the more likable characters. As the show went on, Brian became increasingly annoying to many viewers. His political opinions became much more heavy-handed, and he came across as preachy instead of thoughtful. His attempts at writing became more pathetic, and the show made him look like a complete hack who thought he was brilliant but actually had no talent at all. His relationship with women became creepier, and he did more selfish things that hurt the people around him. Stewie Griffin changed too, though his change was different. In the very first seasons, Stewie was obsessed with killing his mother Lois and taking over the world. He built weapons and made elaborate plans to murder her. He was portrayed as an evil genius baby with murderous intentions. But over time, Stewie became much less focused on killing anyone. He became more interested in time travel, inventions, and hanging out with Brian. His sexuality also became a running joke on the show, with many episodes hinting that he might be gay or bisexual, even though he was still a baby. The violent genius who wanted to kill his mother essentially disappeared and was replaced by a different character with the same name and appearance. Meg Griffin became the punching bag of the entire show. In early episodes, Meg was just an awkward teenager who had trouble fitting in at school, which is a normal problem for a teenage character to have. She was not particularly interesting, but she was not treated as terribly as she would be later. As the show continued, everyone in the show started treating Meg worse and worse. Her own family told her she was worthless. Her father did cruel things to her constantly, and even minor characters would insult her for no reason. The entire show seemed to decide that Meg existed only to be the target of everyone's cruelty. Chris Griffin became much dumber over time, similar to his father. He went from being a somewhat slow kid who had hidden talents to being incredibly stupid and potentially dangerous. Lois became more willing to cheat on Peter and more cruel to her own children. Joe Swanson went from being a brave and capable police officer who happened to use a wheelchair to being the constant butt of jokes about his disability, with the show suggesting his family resented having to take care of him. Cleveland Brown changed so much that he got his own spin-off show where his personality was completely different, and when he came back to Family Guy, he kept many of those new personality traits. These changes are so well documented and so obvious that fans have created detailed timelines and comparison videos showing exactly how each character was different in early seasons compared to later seasons. The shift is not subtle, and it is not something that only a few picky fans noticed. It is a major change in how the show works and how the characters behave, and it happened roughly around the same time that Road to the Multiverse aired. Some fans have tried to explain these changes as Flanderization, which is when a TV character becomes an exaggerated version of one of their traits over time. This is named after Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, who started as a friendly religious neighbor and eventually became so religious that it was his only personality trait. Flanderization happens in many long-running shows, but what happened to Family Guy characters seems more extreme than usual Flanderization. The characters did not just become exaggerated versions of themselves. They became fundamentally different people who act in ways that directly contradict things they said and did in earlier seasons. Other fans have talked about the show hitting a reset button at the end of every episode, which means that no matter what happens during an episode, everything goes back to normal by the next episode. This is common in sitcoms, especially animated sitcoms like The Simpsons and South Park. Characters can die, get married, move away, or experience major life changes, and then the next episode acts like none of it ever happened. This is done so that the show can keep telling new stories without having to worry about continuity or long-term consequences. But what if the multiverse theory from Road to the Multiverse actually explains all of this? What if every episode of Family Guy is happening in a slightly different universe? This would mean that when Peter acts completely different from one episode to the next, it is because we are watching a different version of Peter from a different universe. When characters die and then show up alive in later episodes with no explanation, it is because we switched to a universe where they never died. When Stewie is a murderous villain in one episode and a friendly baby in the next episode, it is because those are two different Stewies from two different universes. Stewie specifically said in Road to the Multiverse that every possible eventuality exists somewhere in the multiverse. That means there is a universe where Peter is exactly as smart as he was in Season 1. There is a universe where Peter is even dumber than he is in the current seasons. There is a universe where Brian is still the voice of reason and not an insufferable hypocrite. There is a universe where Stewie successfully killed Lois and took over the world. There is a universe where Meg is actually popular and pretty. All of these versions of the characters exist simultaneously in different universes, and the show could be hopping between these universes from episode to episode without telling us. This theory would also explain why Family Guy has so many continuity errors. Characters forget things they should remember. Events from previous episodes are contradicted, and the show sometimes acts like earlier episodes never happened. If each episode is taking place in a slightly different universe, then these are not continuity errors at all. They are just the natural differences between universes. The Peter who learned an important lesson about family in one episode is not the same Peter we see in the next episode, so of course he does not remember that lesson. It happened to a different version of him in a different universe. The show itself has acknowledged its own lack of continuity many times through fourth wall-breaking jokes, where characters comment on the fact that they are in a TV show. Characters have made jokes about the show forgetting things, ignoring previous plot lines, and not caring about consistency. If the writers know that fans notice these problems, maybe they included the multiverse episode as a way to explain them. Instead of admitting that the show just does not care about continuity, they can point to Road to the Multiverse and say that every inconsistency is actually an intentional choice, showing us different universes. Family Guy even made a video game sequel called Family Guy Back to the Multiverse that came out in 2012. The game was based on the multiverse concept from the episode and continued the story of Stewie and Brian traveling through different universes. An alternate version of Bertram, a character who had been killed in a previous episode, came back as the villain of the game. The game's plot specifically acknowledged that this Bertram was from a universe where he was never killed, which shows that the creators of Family Guy were still thinking about the multiverse concept years after the episode aired. So when fans talk about how Peter became stupider after the show came back from cancellation, or how Brian became more insufferable, or how Stewie stopped trying to kill Lois, those fans might all be right. But instead of these being mistakes or signs of bad writing, they could all be intentional. Every version of these characters exists somewhere in the infinite multiverse. The sweet Peter who loved his family exists in a universe somewhere. The psychotic Peter who kills people for fun exists in another universe. The show is not picking one universe and sticking with it. The show is jumping around between different universes, showing us different versions of the same characters depending on what kind of story they want to tell that week. This means that every personality change, every continuity break, every character death that gets ignored later, and every timeline reset can all exist at the same time without contradicting each other. They are all real, they are all canon, they just happened in different universes. The multiverse theory that Stewie explained in that one episode from 2009 might be the most important piece of information that Family Guy ever gave its viewers, because it means that no matter what happens in any episode, it is all equally real and equally valid. Every possible version of the Griffin family exists somewhere in the infinite multiverse, and the show can visit any of them at any time. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Brian's son Dylan, the biggest proof yet that human and dog DNA might actually be compatible in this universe. Brian's son Dylan is proof of human DNA compatibility. On the 27th of April, 2008, Family Guy aired an episode that created one of the biggest biological impossibilities in the entire series. The episode was called The Former Life of Brian, and it was the 11th episode of Season 6. In this episode, Brian discovered that he had a biological son. The son was a 13-year-old boy named Dylan Flanagan. Dylan was voiced by Seth Green, who also voices Chris Griffin on the show. The mother of this child was a woman named Tracy Flanagan, who was voiced by Harvey Fierstein. Tracy had been Brian's girlfriend in the past, but Brian had left her before Dylan was born. When Brian went to visit Tracy after many years, she revealed to him that he had a son. She told Brian that Dylan was his biological child, meaning that Brian had actually gotten a human woman pregnant and she had given birth to their child. Tracy then dropped Dylan off at the Griffin house so that Brian could raise him and take responsibility for being a father. This setup created a massive problem that the show has never fully explained or addressed. Dylan is completely human. He looks like a normal teenage boy. He has no dog features at all. He does not have fur. He does not have a tail. He does not have dog ears. And he does not walk on 4 legs. He is just a regular human teenager who happens to have a dog as his biological father. The episode treats this situation as if it is completely normal and unremarkable. Nobody in the episode questions how a dog could possibly have a human child. Peter and Lois tell Brian that he needs to take responsibility for his son, but they never ask how this is biologically possible. Stewie makes jokes about the situation, but he does not express any confusion about the basic biology involved. The other characters in Quahog also treat this as normal. When Dylan later appears in other episodes, nobody ever brings up the fact that his father is a different species. The show simply accepts that Brian can have a human son and moves on with the story. This creates a huge question about how the Family Guy universe actually works. In the real world, different species cannot reproduce with each other and create offspring. Dogs and humans have completely different DNA and completely different numbers of chromosomes. A dog has 78 chromosomes, while a human has 46 chromosomes. These two species are so different that they cannot possibly create a child together. The genetic material is simply not compatible. But in the Family Guy universe, this apparently can happen. Brian, who is clearly identified as a dog throughout the entire series, was able to get a human woman pregnant and produce a child who is fully human. The show itself has contradicted this situation in other episodes. In an earlier episode called Road to Rhode Island from Season 2, Brian specifically stated that he was of a different species and could not impregnate a human. In that episode, Brian was talking to the owner of a crop dusting airplane, and he mentioned that he could not plant a seed in the man's daughter because he was a different species. This was Brian himself, acknowledging that dogs and humans cannot reproduce together. But then, several seasons later, the show introduced Dylan and completely ignored this previous statement. Multiple sources that have analyzed this episode point out that this is a clear case of artistic license with biology. The TV Tropes recap of the episode specifically mentions this contradiction. It notes that Brian previously said he was of a different species and could not impregnate humans, but the existence of Dylan proves that he obviously can. This is one of the biggest plot holes in the entire series, and the writers have never attempted to explain it or fix it. They just introduced Dylan and expected the audience to accept it without asking questions. But the existence of Dylan tells us something very important about the Family Guy universe. It tells us that the talking animals in this world are not just regular animals who happen to be able to talk. They must be something more than that. If Brian can produce a human child, then Brian must have human DNA inside him. His genetic code must be compatible with human genetic code in some way. This means that Brian is not actually a normal dog who learned how to talk. He is something fundamentally different from a regular dog. This has huge implications for understanding what Brian actually is. Throughout the series, Brian is shown doing things that regular dogs cannot do. He walks on 2 legs almost all the time. He drives a car. He writes novels and screenplays. He drinks martinis and wine. He smokes cigarettes and marijuana. He has complex political opinions and philosophical beliefs. He understands time travel and has helped Stewie fix the timeline on multiple occasions. He reads books and watches movies and has sophisticated taste in art and culture. He has romantic relationships with human women, and nobody in the show treats this as unusual or wrong. All of these behaviors suggest that Brian is not just a smart dog. He is something that is part dog and part human, or at least something that shares enough genetic material with humans that he can function in human society without any problems. The fact that he can produce a human child proves that his biology is fundamentally compatible with human biology at the genetic level. This is not something that could happen if Brian was just a regular dog who happened to talk. His DNA must contain human elements that allow him to reproduce with humans. Some fans have developed theories to explain how this could be possible. One popular fan theory suggests that Brian might be the result of a genetic experiment, possibly conducted by the CIA or some other secret organization. This theory points out that Family Guy takes place in a world where the government does all kinds of crazy experiments and secret projects. The CIA appears in multiple episodes and is shown doing highly unethical and bizarre things. If the CIA was running genetic experiments to create human-animal hybrids, then Brian could be one of the results of those experiments. This theory would explain why Brian is so much more human than any other dog in the world. It would explain why he can talk, walk upright, have complex thoughts, and reproduce with humans. If Brian was created in a laboratory by mixing dog DNA with human DNA, then he would be a hybrid creature who has characteristics of both species. His ability to have a human son would make perfect sense because he would already have human genetic material inside him. The experiment that created Brian would have made him biologically compatible with humans. There is some evidence in the show that supports this theory. Brian's intelligence and behavior are far beyond what any normal animal could achieve, even with training. He is not just a smart dog who learned tricks. He has genuine human-level intelligence and consciousness. He understands abstract concepts like mortality, love, art, politics, and philosophy. He writes poetry and novels. He has existential crises about the meaning of his life. These are not things that dogs can do, no matter how intelligent they are. This level of human-like consciousness suggests that Brian has human brain structure and human neural pathways, which would only be possible if he had human DNA. The show has also established that genetic experiments and biological impossibilities are common in the Family Guy universe. In a later episode from season 13 called This Little Piggy, Stewie actually gives birth to a litter of puppies who are the biological children of Brian. Stewie used a machine to take a sample of Brian's DNA and inject it into himself, and then he became pregnant with Brian's puppies. This episode proves that the show is willing to completely ignore real biology and allow cross-species reproduction to happen whenever it wants to. There is also another character in the show who is described as being part dog and part cat. In the episode Life of Brian from season 12, a dog named Vinny temporarily replaces Brian after Brian gets hit by a car and dies. Vinny tells Peter that he is 1/16th cat. This means that somewhere in Vinny's family tree, there was a cat who reproduced with a dog, creating a hybrid offspring. If dogs and cats can interbreed in the Family Guy universe, then dogs and humans being able to interbreed is not that much more impossible. The show has a long history of featuring hybrid animals in cutaway gags and jokes. In season 4, there is a cutaway showing Noah's Ark, and it features animals that are crossbred between completely different species, including an elephant mixed with a penguin. In season 13, there is a cutaway showing a female frog who looks human-like and is dancing to Bon Jovi music. These cutaways suggest that the Family Guy universe operates under different biological rules than the real world, and that species can mix and breed in ways that would be impossible in reality. But Dylan is not just a throwaway joke in a cutaway gag. Dylan is a real character who appears in multiple episodes and has actual storylines. After his introduction in The Former Life of Brian, Dylan returns in season 12 episode 11 called Brian's a Bad Father. In that episode, Dylan has become a star on a Disney Channel show called Parent Boppers. Brian discovers that his son is now famous and successful, and he tries to use Dylan's fame to get himself a job as a writer on the show. This shows that Dylan is not just a one-time joke. He is an actual part of Brian's life and the show's continuity. Dylan is also referenced in many other episodes throughout the series. In the episode Jerome is the New Black, Glenn Quagmire goes on a long rant about all the reasons why he hates Brian, and one of the things he mentions is that Brian is not a part of his son's life. This shows that other characters in the show know about Dylan and remember that he exists. In the episode Quagmire's Mom, Stewie mentions Brian's abandonment of Dylan. In the episode Stewie is enceinte, Stewie alludes to Brian's poor parenting and offers him a second chance at fatherhood. In the episode The Peanut Butter Kid, Peter brings up that Brian's son is an actor. Dylan even attends Brian's wedding in the episode Married with Cancer. All of these references show that Dylan is a permanent part of the Family Guy canon. He is not a mistake that the writers forgot about or retconned out of existence. He is Brian's actual biological son, and the show continues to acknowledge this fact years after his first appearance. This means that the biological implications of Dylan's existence are also permanent parts of the show's universe. If Dylan can exist, then dog-human hybrids are possible in this world. And if dog-human hybrids are possible, then the talking animals in Family Guy must have some level of genetic compatibility with humans. This raises interesting questions about all the other talking animals in the Family Guy universe. Brian is not the only animal who can talk. There are other talking dogs in the show, including Brian's cousin Jasper and a dog named New Brian, who temporarily lived with the Griffins. There is also a talking dog named Vinny, who replaced Brian after his death. All of these dogs can walk upright, talk, and behave in human-like ways. If Brian can reproduce with humans because he has human DNA, then these other dogs might also have human DNA. They might all be part of the same genetic experiment or the same evolutionary process that gave them human characteristics. The show has never explained where these talking animals come from or why they exist. They are simply accepted as part of the world. But the existence of Dylan suggests that there must be some scientific explanation for why these animals can talk and behave like humans. They cannot just be normal animals who learned how to talk. Their biology must be fundamentally different from normal animal biology. They must share genetic material with humans in order to be able to function in human society the way they do. This also raises questions about Brian's sentience and consciousness. Is Brian just a dog who is really smart, or is Brian actually part human in terms of his brain structure and mental capabilities? The fact that he can have a human child suggests that his brain must also be partly human. Human consciousness and intelligence come from having a human brain with a human neural structure. If Brian has human-level consciousness and intelligence, then he probably has a human-like brain, which means he probably has human DNA that codes for that brain structure. This would mean that Brian's sentience is not just psychological. It is not just that Brian learned how to think like a human through education or experience. His sentience must be evolutionary or genetic. He must have been born with the biological capacity for human-level thought because he has human genetic material inside him. This makes Brian fundamentally different from a normal dog in ways that go far beyond just being able to talk. He is a hybrid creature who is part dog and part human at the genetic level. The age difference between Brian and Dylan also creates an interesting problem. Brian is stated to be approximately 8 years old during season 6 when Dylan is introduced. But Dylan is 13 years old. This means that Brian would have had to father Dylan when he was -5 years old, which is obviously impossible. Some fans have suggested that maybe Brian and Stewie use time travel to make this possible, since Brian and Stewie have access to a time machine and use it frequently throughout the series. But the show has never actually explained this timeline issue. This timeline problem actually supports the theory that Brian might be the result of a genetic experiment. If Brian was created in a laboratory, then his age might not work the same way that a normal dog's age works. He might age more slowly than a regular dog because he has human DNA that affects his development and lifespan. Regular dogs age much faster than humans and do not live as long. But Brian seems to age at roughly the same rate as the human characters in the show. He has been 8 to 10 years old for the entire run of the series, even though the show has been on the air since 1999. This suggests that Brian's biology is not the same as a normal dog's biology. The existence of Dylan forces us to completely rethink what Brian actually is. He cannot be just a dog who talks. He must be something more than that. He must have human DNA that makes him biologically compatible with humans. This human DNA probably also explains his intelligence, his consciousness, his behavior, and his ability to function in human society. Brian is not a dog pretending to be human. Brian is a hybrid creature who actually is part human at the genetic level. This also changes how we should think about the other talking animals in Family Guy. If Brian has human DNA, then the other talking animals probably do too. They are not just animals who learn tricks. They are hybrid creatures who share genetic material with humans. This is why they can talk, walk upright, have jobs, drive cars, and participate in human society. They are biologically part human, even though they look like animals. The show has never explicitly stated any of this. The writers have never come out and said that Brian is a genetic experiment or that he has human DNA. They just introduced Dylan and expected the audience to accept it without questioning the biology. But the biology cannot be ignored. If Dylan exists and is Brian's biological son, then Brian must be genetically compatible with humans. And if Brian is genetically compatible with humans, then he must have human genetic material inside him. There is no other way to explain how a dog could father a human child. This makes Dylan one of the most important characters in the entire series, even though he only appears in a few episodes. His mere existence proves something fundamental about the nature of reality in the Family Guy universe. It proves that the talking animals are not just animals. They are hybrid creatures with human DNA. They are the results of either genetic engineering or some kind of evolutionary process that mixed animal DNA with human DNA. This is the only scientific explanation that makes sense given the facts that the show has presented. The show treats this as completely normal and unremarkable, but it is actually one of the most significant revelations about how the Family Guy universe operates. It tells us that species barriers do not work the same way in this world as they do in the real world. It tells us that dogs and humans can interbreed and produce offspring. And if dogs and humans can interbreed, then they must share enough genetic similarity that their DNA can combine and create a viable child. This means that Brian is not just a dog. He is something that is part dog and part human, and Dylan is the proof of this fact. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we've got the theory that Quahog itself might actually be alive. A conscious town that rebuilds, resets, and remembers everything. Quahog, as a living organism, the town is conscious. Something strange happens in Quahog, Rhode Island, that nobody ever talks about. Buildings get destroyed and reappear. Houses explode and rebuild themselves overnight. The entire town gets vaporized by nuclear weapons and exists again the next week. For over 20 years, Family Guy has operated under rules that defy physics, memory, and basic logic. Most fans chalk this up to cartoon physics or lazy writing, but what if there is an explanation that actually makes sense? What if Quahog itself is alive? The evidence is everywhere once you start looking. The town does not just reset between episodes, it heals, it rebuilds, it erases damage from existence as though the destruction never happened. Quahog behaves less like a collection of buildings and more like a biological organism with the ability to regenerate damaged tissue. The question is not whether this happens. The question is why nobody in the show ever notices or questions it. The most obvious proof that something supernatural governs Quahog is what happens to Cleveland Brown's house. In episode after episode, Peter Griffin destroys the front of Cleveland's home. The damage is never minor. The entire front wall gets obliterated. A tank shell blows it open in Hell Comes to Quahog. A giraffe crashes through it in Barely Legal. Peter backs his car through it in Family Gay. A space shuttle levels it in The Perfect Castaway. Every single time, Cleveland is taking a bath on the second floor. The bathtub slides out of the destroyed house and crashes onto the front lawn with Cleveland still in it. He says the same thing every time. What the hell? No, 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 no. This happens so many times that Cleveland himself comments on it. In Barely Legal, he says he needs to stop taking baths during Peter's shenanigans. This means Cleveland is aware that his house keeps getting destroyed, yet by the next episode, his house is always perfectly intact. No construction crews, no insurance adjusters, no rebuilding process. The house simply exists again as though nothing ever happened. When Cleveland moves to Virginia for his spin-off show, even his new house in Stoolbend suffers the same fate. In Spies Reminiscent of Us, a Russian missile crashes into his new home and the bathtub gag happens again. Tim the bear walks up and says, "I don't get it," because even characters within the show recognize that something impossible keeps occurring. Cleveland's house in Virginia should have nothing to do with Quahog, yet the same regenerative force follows him there, suggesting that Cleveland himself might be connected to whatever supernatural phenomenon governs reality in this universe. The truly disturbing detail comes from Gone with the Wind, an episode of The Cleveland Show. Loretta Brown dies when Peter swings a dinosaur skeleton into Cleveland's old Quahog house. She falls out of the bathtub and breaks her neck. The episode mentions that Cleveland has fallen out of his bathtub more times than could possibly be funny and has never suffered a scratch. But when someone else is in that bathtub, they die. The house itself seems to protect Cleveland specifically while allowing others to be harmed. This suggests intent. This suggests awareness. In Da Boom, the entire world ends. Y2K causes a worldwide nuclear attack. Missiles launch everywhere. Quahog is destroyed. The Griffin family survives because Peter locked them in the basement, but when they emerge, everything is gone. Spooner Street is rubble. the town is ashes. They travel to Natick, Massachusetts, and find a Twinkie factory. Peter establishes a new settlement called New Quahog. He becomes mayor. Stewie mutates into an octopus and lays eggs. Those eggs hatch and destroy the entire settlement. By the next episode, none of this matters. Quahog is intact. The world is fine. The show explains this away as Pam Ewing's dream, a parody of Dallas, but that explanation does not work within the internal logic of Family Guy. The characters remember the events of Da Boom in later episodes. They reference it. They make jokes about it. So it was not a dream in the traditional sense. It happened, and then reality reset. This is not the only time Quahog suffers catastrophic destruction. The town gets nuked, flooded, invaded, and demolished repeatedly throughout the series. Each time, it reconstructs itself perfectly. No episode ever shows the rebuilding process. No character questions how their destroyed home is suddenly intact. This is not cartoon physics. This is something actively maintaining the town's existence despite repeated attempts to destroy it. The Griffin family home at 31 Spooner Street changes constantly. The living room carpet was yellow in early seasons. Now it is green. This is not an animation update. Characters within the show notice environmental changes all the time. Yet nobody ever comments that their carpet is suddenly a different color. Rooms appear and disappear. A downstairs bathroom exists in Mr. Saturday Night and never appears again. Peter's Quonset hut is present in some episodes and absent in others. The master bathroom moves from the right side of the bedroom to the left side depending on the episode. In Death Has a Shadow, Peter builds a moat around the entire house. By the next episode, the moat is gone, not filled in, not drained, just absent. In Peterbus Unum, the Griffin house is missing from all city maps. Peter discovers that his property technically does not exist within Rhode Island's borders and declares his home an independent nation called Pretoria. By the end of the episode, this is resolved and the house is back on the map, but the episode proves that the house itself has a fluid relationship with reality. The house also has a documented history of supernatural instability. In Petergeist, the family learns that their home was built on a Native American burial ground called Custer's Scoreboard, a cemetery specifically for Indians killed by General Custer. This is presented as a joke, but it might explain why the house seems to exist partially outside normal reality. In All About Alana, Alana discovers a pool in the backyard that the family never knew existed. Not a new pool, an old, overgrown pool covered in grass and weeds. The pool has always been there, yet the family has no memory of it. This suggests that Quahog does not just heal physical damage, it alters memory. It controls what residents perceive and remember. The town is not just alive, it is actively editing reality. Quahog's relationship with time is wrong. The show has been running for over 20 years, but the characters do not age. Stewie is still a baby. Chris and Meg are still teenagers. This is standard for animated sitcoms, but Family Guy takes it further. Episodes reference specific years and dates that contradict each other. Peter's age changes, Lois's background changes, major events happen and are forgotten, deaths are reversed, marriages are erased. In The Courtship of Stewie's Father, Stewie becomes a NASCAR driver and ages several years in a single episode. By the next episode, he is a baby again. In Stu and Stewie's Excellent Adventure, Stewie meets his 35-year-old self. This version of Stewie has lived an entire life that the baby Stewie has no memory of. The episode suggests that multiple timelines exist simultaneously, and Quahog is the point where they all intersect. The clearest evidence that time is broken comes from episodes like Back to the Pilot, where Brian and Stewie time travel to the first episode of Family Guy. They interact with their past selves. They change events. When they return to the present, some things have changed, but most things remain the same. The timeline should be destroyed, but Quahog maintains its integrity. It resists paradoxes. It smooths over contradictions. This is exactly how a biological organism maintains homeostasis. When the human body is injured, it does not remember every scar and wound. It heals and returns to its default state. Quahog does the same thing. Damage is corrected. Timelines are repaired. The town always returns to equilibrium. The most disturbing aspect of this theory is how the residents of Quahog react to the impossible events around them. They do not question why Cleveland's house keeps getting destroyed and rebuilt. They do not investigate why the world ended and then unended. They accept that time is fluid, Geography is inconsistent, and death is temporary. This is not ignorance, this is conditioning. Quahog may be suppressing awareness of its own existence. The citizens cannot perceive that their reality is being edited because the organism that controls their reality does not allow them to notice. This would explain why characters forget major events, why continuity is optional, why nobody ever says, "Wait, did not this exact thing happen last month?" There are rare moments where characters almost break through this conditioning. In Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q, the show presents a very serious episode about domestic violence. The tone is completely different from normal Family Guy episodes. The characters behave like real people instead of cartoon characters. For one episode, Quahog feels like a real place with real consequences. Then the next episode, everything is back to absurd comedy. The town itself seems to shift between states of reality, and the residents shift with it. This suggests that Quahog is not just healing physical damage. It is maintaining a specific emotional and narrative tone. When things get too real, too permanent, too consequential, the organism resets. It forces the characters back into their default behaviors. Peter must be stupid. Meg must be abused. Brian must be pretentious. Any deviation from these roles is corrected by the next episode. If Quahog is alive, what kind of life form is it? The most likely answer is that Quahog is a temporal organism. It exists across multiple timelines simultaneously. Every version of every event that could happen in Quahog does happen, all at once, in overlapping realities. The episodes we see are just glimpses into different iterations of the same town. This would explain why continuity is so broken. Each episode might be taking place in a slightly different version of Quahog, where different past events occurred. This is supported by Road to the Multiverse, which explicitly confirms that infinite parallel universes exist. Stewie's remote control allows him to travel between these universes, but what if Quahog itself is the hub where all these universes intersect? What if the town exists in all timelines at once? This theory explains everything. Why buildings heal, why death is temporary, why time is inconsistent, why characters forget major events. Quahog is not bound by linear time. It is a living knot of overlapping realities, constantly shifting between different versions of itself. The residents are not living in one timeline. They are living in all timelines simultaneously, which is why their memories and histories are so contradictory. The town's ability to reset might also be defensive. Every time something truly catastrophic happens, something that would permanently destroy Quahog, the organism shifts to a different timeline where that event did not occur. This is why the nuclear apocalypse in Daboom is later revealed to be a dream. It was not really a dream, it happened. But Quahog jumped to a timeline where it did not happen, and the residents' memories were adjusted accordingly. If this theory is true, then Family Guy is not really about the Griffin family. It is about Quahog. The town is the main character. The Griffins and everyone else are just cells in a larger organism, acting out patterns that the organism requires to maintain its existence. Peter's stupidity, Meg's suffering, Stewie's violence, Brian's pretension, these are not personality traits. They are functions. Each character serves a specific role in keeping Quahog stable. This explains why the characters never grow or change. They cannot. They are locked into their functions. Anytime a character tries to change, Peter becoming smart, Brian becoming successful, Meg becoming happy, the organism corrects them. By the next episode, they are back to baseline. Not because the writers are lazy, but because Quahog will not allow permanent change. The most terrifying possibility is that the characters are aware of this on some level, but cannot articulate it. They know they are trapped in loops. They know reality resets, but they cannot perceive it consciously because Quahog suppresses that awareness. They are prisoners in a living town that will not let them escape, grow, or die permanently. Quahog is not just alive, it is a predator. It feeds on narrative. It consumes stories and characters and spits them back out in endless variations. The citizens of Quahog are not people, they are food. For over 2 decades, fans have watched Family Guy destroy and rebuild itself over and over. Most assume this is just bad continuity or cartoon logic, but the evidence suggests something far stranger. Quahog, Rhode Island is a living temporal organism that regenerates damage, erases memories, and traps its residents in overlapping timelines. The town is conscious, the town is aware, and the town will never let the Griffin family escape. Every episode where buildings are destroyed and instantly repaired, every reset that erases consequences, every timeline shift that contradicts the previous episode. All of it points to the same conclusion. Quahog is alive, and everything that happens within its borders is part of a larger biological process that we, as viewers, can only glimpse one episode at a time. The question is not whether Quahog is alive. The question is, what happens if the characters ever realize it? Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Death is the only character who actually remembers every reset. There is one character in Family Guy who never forgets. One character who appears across timelines, witnesses every contradiction, and exists outside the rules that trap everyone else. That character is Death. Not Peter, not Brian, not even Stewie with his time machine. Death is the only entity in Quahog who experiences every version of reality simultaneously and remembers them all. He is not just collecting souls. He is documenting the constant collapse and reconstruction of the Family Guy universe. The evidence is hidden in plain sight across 2 decades of episodes. Death behaves differently from every other character. He references events that should not have happened yet. He knows things he should not know. He moves through time in ways that suggest he is not bound by linear progression. Most importantly, he never seems surprised when reality resets. Everyone else in Quahog forgets. Death remembers everything. Death is a recurring character who appears when people die to collect them. He was voiced by Norm Macdonald in his first appearance and Adam Carolla in all later episodes. But Death is not just a character. He is a function. He exists at the boundary between life and non-existence. This position gives him a perspective that no living character can have. In Death is a Bitch, Death suffers a sprained ankle while chasing Peter and has to rest at the Griffin house. While staying there, Death explains that people must not learn that the rules of death have been suspended. He sends Peter to do his work, lending Peter his cloak and scythe. This episode reveals something crucial about Death's role. He maintains the natural order. When Death is incapacitated, people become immortal and cannot feel pain. The universe itself breaks down. Death is not just collecting souls. He is holding reality together. This explains why Death would be aware of timeline resets. If his job is to maintain cosmic order, he would need to perceive all versions of that order. When Quahog resets, when timelines shift, when contradictions appear, Death would be the one who has to reconcile which souls belong to which version of reality. He cannot forget the resets because his entire function depends on remembering who has died in every iteration of the timeline. Consider what happens in Death Lives. Peter is struck by lightning while golfing on his anniversary and has a near-death experience. Death appears and tells Peter that his marriage is in trouble. He says that unless Peter changes, Lois will eventually divorce him, and 2 years after the divorce, Peter will commit suicide. Death then takes Peter back in time to show him the moment he and Lois met and fell in love. This is presented as a journey through Peter's memories, but it reveals something more disturbing. Death has access to alternate futures. He can see timelines that have not happened yet. He tells Peter about a future divorce and suicide that never occurs in the actual show. This means Death is not just observing one timeline. He is observing multiple possible timelines simultaneously. During this episode, Death takes Peter back to the moment Peter met Lois. They witness Peter's first encounter with Carter Pewterschmidt, who knocks Peter out and has his servants drop him from a plane into the ocean. Peter is rescued by a Navy aircraft carrier, where Quagmire is serving. Peter then gets a ride back to Rhode Island with Cleveland, pursued by members of the Ku Klux Klan. This flashback contradicts other episodes about how these characters met. Other episodes suggest Peter met Cleveland and Quagmire as neighbors in Quahog, but in this episode, they meet much earlier under completely different circumstances. The show never addresses this contradiction, but Death witnesses it. Death is present for both versions of events. He sees the inconsistency because he exists outside the timeline. The most telling detail is how Death behaves when he takes Peter through these memories. He does not seem confused by the contradictions. He does not question why the timeline does not match other episodes. He simply accepts that multiple versions of events exist. This is not ignorance. This is knowledge. Death knows that Family Guy's timeline is broken. He knows that different versions of the same events occur in different episodes, and he knows this because he experiences all of those versions. In Meet the Quagmires, another episode about time travel, Death appears again to help Peter. Peter is bored with his life and asks Death to show him what his life would have been like if he had made different choices. Death allows Peter to travel back to 1984 to relive his youth. During their adventures, Peter pulls down Death's hood and reveals a skull with snakes and bugs crawling all over it. This is different from how Death appears in other episodes. In Wasted Talent, Death's skull is clean. In Death Lives, it is covered with bugs. Death's physical form changes between episodes. For a normal character, this would be an animation inconsistency. But for Death, it might be evidence that he exists in multiple states simultaneously. Different versions of Death appear in different timelines, but they are all the same Death, experiencing everything at once. Death's relationship with time is fundamentally different from every other character. In Death is a Bitch, when Death gets injured and cannot perform his duties, people become immortal. Stewie repeatedly injures himself and feels no pain. An old woman survives being hit by a car. The episode demonstrates that Death is not just a collector of souls. He is a mechanism that enforces mortality itself. If Death maintains the rule that people must die, then Death must also maintain the rule that time progresses forward. But if time in Quahog is broken, if resets occur, then Death would need to exist outside of time to continue enforcing mortality across all versions of the timeline. This explains Death's unusual behavior in several episodes. In Mr. Saturday Night, Death shows up at the Griffin house to collect Brian after Brian chokes on food. But Jonathan Weed, Peter's boss, chokes at the same moment. Death takes Weed instead and leaves Brian alive. Death does not seem surprised by this. He simply adjusts and takes the person who actually died. This suggests Death is working from a list of who is supposed to die and when. But if the timeline keeps resetting, that list would constantly change. Death would need to track multiple versions of the list across multiple timelines. In The Perfect Castaway, Death appears to point out a giant wave about to sink a ship. In I Take Thee Quagmire, Death comes to Quagmire's staged funeral to discuss the fate of the television show Joey with NBC executives. In Petarded, Death appears briefly in a deleted musical number about Peter being intellectually disabled. In every appearance, Death shows knowledge of events beyond what he should know. He references television shows, pop culture, and specific details about characters' lives that he would only know if he had been observing them constantly across multiple timelines. The most significant evidence comes from how Death interacts with major timeline shifts. In Daboom, the entire world is destroyed by Y2K. Nuclear missiles launch. Quahog is vaporized. Most of the population dies. Death should have been overwhelmed with work. Millions of souls to collect all at once. But Death never appears in this episode. Why? Because Death already knew the timeline would reset. He knew that this apocalypse would be erased. He did not need to collect these souls, because these deaths would be undone. This is not speculation. The episode ends with the entire story being revealed as a dream, but someone had to maintain reality during that dream. Someone had to hold the universe together long enough for it to reset. That someone was Death. Death's job is not just to collect souls. His job is to witness. He observes every death in every timeline and ensures that death itself continues to function as a concept. When Brian dies in Life of Brian after being hit by a car, Death presumably collects him. But when Stewie uses time travel to prevent Brian's death in Christmas Guy, Death allows it. Death does not fight to keep Brian dead. He simply accepts that the timeline has changed and Brian is alive again. This is not incompetence. This is acceptance. Death understands that his role is to adapt to whatever version of reality currently exists. Consider what this means for Death's mental state. He experiences every death in Quahog across every timeline. He watches Cleveland fall out of his bathtub dozens of times. He sees Peter die and come back repeatedly. He witnesses Meg suffer endless abuse. He collects Stewie's soul in multiple episodes, only to see Stewie alive again in the next one. For any other character, this would cause a mental breakdown. But Death continues performing his duties without complaint. He makes jokes, he dates girls, he lives with his mother. He behaves normally despite experiencing a constantly shifting reality. This suggests that Death has either accepted the nature of Quahog's broken timeline or he has always known about it. Maybe Death existed before the timeline started breaking. Maybe he remembers a version of Quahog where reality was stable and linear. Or maybe Death has always lived in a multiverse where timelines overlap and contradict each other, and he knows that Quahog is just one particularly unstable nexus point. Death's awareness creates a tragic irony. He is the only character who truly understands what is happening to Quahog. He knows the town resets. He knows the characters are trapped in loops. He knows that nothing really matters because everything will eventually be undone, and he cannot tell anyone who would believe him. If Death tried to explain to Peter that reality keeps resetting, Peter would not understand. Peter cannot even remember events from previous episodes. Death is completely alone in his knowledge. This isolation might explain Death's personality. He is sarcastic, detached, and emotionally distant. He lives with his mother and has trouble dating. He struggles to connect with people. In Death Lives, when he finally gets a date with Amy, a girl who works at a pet shop, she talks endlessly about animal rights. Death becomes so annoyed that he touches her and she dies instantly. He calls for the check without any emotion. This is not cruelty. This is exhaustion. Death has seen everything so many times that nothing feels real to him anymore. He knows that Amy will probably be alive again in another timeline. He knows that nothing is permanent, so why should he care? Death's role as the only character aware of the resets makes him the most important character in Family Guy. Not Peter, not Stewie, not even Brian with his intellectualism and self-awareness. Death is the thread that connects all episodes across all seasons. Every time reality breaks, Death is there to witness it. Every time a character dies and comes back, Death processes both versions. He is the constant in an inconstant universe. This also means Death might be suffering. Imagine experiencing every possible version of events simultaneously. Imagine remembering every death, every reset, every contradiction. Imagine watching the same people die in different ways across different timelines and having to process all of it as equally real. Death is not just collecting souls. He is carrying the weight of infinite realities. The show occasionally hints at Death's burden. In Grumpy Old Man, Death himself dies in a car accident caused by Carter Pewterschmidt. When Death dies, Super Death arrives to collect him. Death asks if he will go to heaven, but Super Death tells him he is being reincarnated in China. Death disappears and instantly reappears as a baby girl in China, then reappears again as himself. This scene is played for laughs, but it reveals something important. Even Death is subject to cosmic rules. Even Death can die, but unlike everyone else, Death immediately comes back and remembers dying. He experiences his own death and resurrection in real time. This confirms that Death exists outside normal mortality. Death's unique position makes him the key to understanding Family Guy's universe. The show is not about the Griffin family. It is about a broken timeline that constantly resets and contradicts itself. Death is the only character who perceives this. Everyone else is trapped in their roles, forced to repeat the same patterns, unable to remember previous iterations. Death alone stands outside the loop and watches it spin. This raises a dark question. Does Death have the power to fix the timeline? Could he stop the resets? Could he make reality stable again? Or is he as trapped as everyone else, forced to witness infinite variations of the same events without any ability to change them? The show never answers this. Death never tries to fix anything. He simply continues doing his job, collecting souls, maintaining mortality, and watching Quahog destroy and rebuild itself over and over. Maybe Death tried to fix things in the past and failed. Maybe he learned that the timeline cannot be repaired. Maybe he accepted that his role is to observe rather than intervene. Or maybe Death knows something that we do not. Maybe the resets serve a purpose. Maybe Quahog needs to be unstable. Maybe the constant collapse and reconstruction of reality is not a bug, but a feature. The final piece of evidence comes from how other characters interact with Death. No one ever questions his existence. No one asks how Death moves through time or how he knows so much about their lives. Even characters like Brian and Stewie, who should be skeptical, accept Death without hesitation. In Death is a Bitch, when Death stays at the Griffin house, the family treats him like a normal house guest. They lend him clothes. They make small talk. They do not ask existential questions about mortality or the nature of the universe. This is not because they are stupid. This is because, on some unconscious level, they know that questioning Death would force them to confront the instability of their reality. Death is a mercy. He exists so that no one else has to carry the burden of knowing. He absorbs all the contradictions, all the resets, all the impossible overlapping timelines, and he processes them silently. The citizens of Quahog can live their lives without questioning why Cleveland's house keeps getting destroyed and rebuilt. They can forget major events, they can die and come back, and death will be there, remembering everything, ensuring that the mechanism of mortality continues to function even when nothing else makes sense. In the end, Death is not the villain of Family Guy. He is the hero. He is the only character strong enough to witness an infinite fracturing reality without losing his mind. He collects souls across contradictory timelines. He maintains cosmic order in a universe that has no order. He remembers every reset so that no one else has to. And he does this forever, alone, with no hope of escape or relief. Death is the only character who truly understands Family Guy, and that understanding is his eternal punishment. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Stewie Griffin is the embodiment of the creator's control over the entire show. Stewie Griffin is not simply a character within Family Guy. He is Seth MacFarlane's avatar inside the fictional universe he created. His genius, his time manipulation abilities, his reality-bending inventions, and his meta-awareness all mirror MacFarlane's position as the writer-creator who controls the show's narrative. Stewie's intelligence is not comic exaggeration, it is creative omnipotence manifesting within a fictional sandbox. When Stewie rewrites time, he is doing what MacFarlane does in every writer's room. When Stewie invents impossible technology, he is exercising the same godlike control MacFarlane has over Family Guy's reality. Stewie is the creator's hand made visible inside his own creation. The evidence exists throughout the series, but certain episodes make it undeniable. When Stewie invents a remote control that allows him and Brian to travel between parallel universes, this is not presented as luck or accident. Stewie deliberately creates a device that gives him godlike control over reality itself. In one universe, everyone is drawn in a Disney animation style. In another, the laws of physics don't apply. In another, dogs rule humans. Stewie does not discover these universes. He accesses them. He moves through them at will. He controls which reality he inhabits at any given moment. This is exactly what a show creator does. MacFarlane can write an episode in any style. He can make the Griffins realistic or cartoonish. He can flip the power dynamic between any characters. He can rewrite the rules of the universe with a single script revision. When Stewie uses that remote control, he is performing the exact function that MacFarlane performs when he sits down to write Family Guy. The remote control is a visual metaphor for narrative authority. When Stewie and Brian travel back to the first episode of Family Guy and interact with past versions of themselves, something crucial happens. Stewie does not just time travel. He is aware that he is moving through the show's own history. He references specific plot points from the early seasons. He knows these events already happened because he is moving through a narrative that has already been written and aired. This is not how characters normally experience time. Characters live in the present. They remember the past, but they do not have perfect recall of every plot point from years ago. Stewie does, because Stewie operates on a meta level. He is not trapped in the show's timeline the way other characters are. He can step outside it, view it as a completed work, and then re-enter it wherever he wants. This is the perspective of a creator reviewing his own material. The movie about Stewie shows adult Stewie from the future. This version of Stewie has given up world domination and villainy. He works at a normal job, he is in a normal relationship, he has become ordinary. And this version of Stewie is miserable. When young Stewie meets his adult self, adult Stewie reveals that he gave up his genius inventions and schemes because he thought growing up meant being normal. The film's message is clear. When Stewie stops being a genius, when he stops trying to control reality, he loses what makes him special. He becomes just another character. The film explicitly rejects this future. By the end, it is erased. Stewie remains a baby with infinite intelligence and infinite ambition. The show will not allow him to become powerless. Because if Stewie loses his omnipotence, the metaphor breaks. The creator cannot stop being the creator. MacFarlane cannot become just another character in his own show. Stewie's intelligence is permanent because his role as creator avatar is permanent. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters on Family Guy: Peter, Stewie, Brian, and Quagmire. But his vocal relationship with Stewie is unique. Peter's voice is exaggerated and buffoonish. It is a cartoon voice meant to be ridiculous. Quagmire's voice is a character bit, a parody of old-timey radio announcers. Brian's voice is naturalistic and serves as the show's straight man. but Stewie's voice is something else entirely. Stewie speaks with a British accent that no one in his family has. He uses vocabulary that no baby would know. He references high culture, literature, military strategy, and advanced science. His voice is completely divorced from what a baby should sound like. This is not an accident. Stewie's voice is designed to break immersion. We are never allowed to forget that this is not a real baby. We are constantly reminded that someone very intelligent is speaking through this character. That someone is MacFarlane himself. When Stewie makes a reference to classic cinema or theoretical physics, we are hearing MacFarlane's actual knowledge and interests channeled through the character. Stewie is not performing intelligence, he possesses it, and that intelligence comes directly from his creator. The British accent is particularly telling. It is completely unexplained within the show's reality. Lois and Peter do not have British accents. The Griffins are not British. No one taught Stewie to speak this way. The accent exists purely as a marker of difference. It tells the audience, this character is not like the others. This character operates by different rules. This character has access to something the rest of the family does not have. What Stewie has access to is the creator's perspective. The British accent is MacFarlane's choice as a creator, not something that emerges organically from the character's environment. It is an authorial intrusion, and authorial intrusions are exactly what define Stewie's existence. Stewie's repeated ability to manipulate time is the most direct evidence of his role as creator avatar. Time travel appears throughout the series, and Stewie is always the one who controls it. When Stewie takes Peter back to the past so Peter can experience his youth again, this is framed as a favor. Stewie has a time machine. He can use it whenever he wants. He decides who gets to travel through time and why. This is not presented as dangerous or difficult. For Stewie, time travel is casual. It is a tool he has mastered completely. This is the position of a television writer. MacFarlane can set an episode in any time period. He can do flashbacks to the characters' pasts. He can flash forward to potential futures. He can rewrite history to make jokes or explore alternate scenarios. Stewie's time machine is a physical representation of this narrative control. When he sends Peter to the past, he is doing what MacFarlane does when he writes a flashback episode. The entire series of episodes where Stewie and Brian travel together through time and space makes this even clearer. These are not typical Family Guy episodes. They have higher animation budgets, they explore serious themes, they break format, and they always center on Stewie as the one with power. Brian comes along for the ride, but Stewie is the pilot. Stewie decides where they go. Stewie builds the machines. Stewie solves the problems. Brian is the audience surrogate, the normal person reacting to impossible situations. Stewie is the creator, making those situations happen. In one of these episodes, Stewie and Brian are trapped in a bank vault and facing death. Brian asks Stewie if he has any inventions that could save them. Stewie pulls out a device and casually mentions he could use it to travel through time and escape, but he doesn't want to because time travel is boring to him now. He has done it so many times that it has lost meaning. This is an extraordinary moment. Stewie has become bored with godlike power. He has access to reality warping technology, and he considers it mundane. This is the ennui of a creator who has told so many stories that even impossible scenarios feel routine. MacFarlane has been writing Family Guy since the late 90s. He has written hundreds of episodes. He has killed and resurrected characters. He has created and destroyed relationships. He has explored every possible genre and style. Like Stewie, he has access to infinite narrative possibilities, and like Stewie, he must occasionally feel the weight of that infinite access. When Stewie is bored with time travel, we are seeing MacFarlane's own relationship with his creative power reflected back at us. Stewie's inventions deserve closer examination. He builds time machines, teleportation devices, mind control rays, shrink rays, weather control machines, and countless other impossible technologies. He does this casually, often in a single scene, with no explanation of where he gets materials or how he understands physics that would baffle real-world scientists. The show never questions this. Stewie's genius is treated as a given. He can invent anything because the plot requires it. This is exactly how writers work. If MacFarlane needs a character to travel through time, he writes a time machine into existence. If he needs a character to read minds, he invents mind-reading technology. The writer does not need to explain where materials come from or how the science works. The writer simply declares that the technology exists, and within the fictional universe, it does. Stewie's laboratory is a physical manifestation of the writer's room. Both are places where impossible things become real through pure creative will. Consider also what Stewie does with his inventions. He rarely uses them for consistent goals. In early seasons, he wants to kill Lois and take over the world, but these goals are abandoned and resumed randomly. Stewie's motivations change depending on what the episode requires. Sometimes he is a villain, sometimes he is a hero, sometimes he is apathetic. His character shifts to serve the narrative rather than following a logical, psychological progression. This is not bad writing. This is Stewie functioning as a narrative tool rather than a realistic character. He becomes whatever MacFarlane needs him to be in any given episode. And he can do this because he is not bound by normal character development. He is bound only by what serves the story. This is the ultimate freedom of the creator avatar. Stewie does not have to make sense as a person because he is not a person. He is a function of the creative process given physical form. The question of whether other characters can understand Stewie is one of the show's most discussed mysteries. In some episodes, the family clearly hears and responds to everything Stewie says. In other episodes, they seem unable to understand him at all. Brian always understands Stewie. Adults sometimes do, and sometimes don't. The show has never provided a consistent answer to this question, and this inconsistency is often cited as a continuity error. But it is not an error. It is the point. Stewie's comprehensibility changes based on narrative need because Stewie exists on a different level of reality than the other characters. When the story requires the family to interact with Stewie's schemes, they can understand him. When the story requires Stewie to operate independently, they cannot. MacFarlane has explicitly stated in interviews that Stewie's comprehensibility is fluid and changes based on what is funny or necessary for the plot. This is not a character trait. This is an acknowledgement that Stewie operates by writer's rules rather than character rules. No other character on the show has this privilege. Peter is always understood. Lois is always understood. Even Brian, who is a talking dog, is always understood by everyone. Only Stewie's voice exists in this quantum state of being simultaneously heard and unheard. This is because Stewie alone has access to the creator's perspective. He can choose when to be part of the show's reality and when to step outside it. This is not a power any character should have. It is a power only an author has. Stewie's relationship with Brian further reinforces this dynamic. Brian is the only character who always, without exception, understands Stewie. Brian is also the character who most closely resembles a traditional author insert. He is a writer. He is pretentious. He is intellectual. He makes references to high culture and literature. In many ways, Brian represents MacFarlane's social and cultural identity, while Stewie represents MacFarlane's creative power. When Stewie and Brian go on adventures together, they represent two halves of the creative process. Brian is the idea generator, the one who thinks about themes and meaning. Stewie is the executor, the one who has the power to make those ideas physically real within the show's universe. Brian can imagine traveling to alternate dimensions, but Stewie builds the machine that makes it happen. Brian can propose time travel, but Stewie controls the timeline. Together, they are a complete author, the imagination and the execution. Their arguments and conflicts also reflect internal creative struggles. When Brian questions Stewie's methods, it mirrors a writer questioning their own choices. When Stewie dismisses Brian's pretensions, it mirrors a writer's frustration with overthinking. When they reconcile and work together, it mirrors the moment when creative doubt resolves into decisive action. The Stewie and Brian episodes are not just about friendship, they are about the internal dialogue of creation itself. There is also the matter of Stewie's sexuality, which the show has deliberately kept ambiguous. Stewie shows attraction to both men and women. He has romantic fantasies about female characters and male characters. The show refuses to define his orientation clearly, and MacFarlane has stated in interviews that Stewie's sexuality is intentionally left open to interpretation. This ambiguity serves a specific purpose in the creator avatar reading. A character who exists within the show's reality should have a defined sexuality. People in the real world have orientations, even if they are questioning or fluid. But Stewie does not need a defined sexuality because he is not a person developing an identity. He is a narrative function. His attractions shift based on what creates the best joke or the most interesting story in any given moment. This is not realistic character development. This is a writer using a character as a vehicle for different types of humor and commentary. Stewie can be whatever the episode needs him to be because he is not constrained by the rules that govern actual people. The show's treatment of Stewie's age works the same way. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real-world time. He has not aged a single day. No explanation is given for this. The Griffins do not comment on it. The show does not acknowledge it. Stewie simply remains frozen at 1 year old while hundreds of episodes pass by. Every other baby in the show's universe ages normally. Stewie does not. This is because Stewie cannot age. If he aged, he would lose his status as a baby genius, which is the source of his comedic and narrative power. The contrast between his infantile appearance and his adult intelligence is fundamental to his character. But more importantly, Stewie cannot age because he exists outside the show's timeline. He is not moving through time the way other characters are. He is manipulating time. He is observing time. He is above time. Just as MacFarlane does not age within the show's universe because he exists outside of it, Stewie does not age because he shares that extra-dimensional perspective. When Stewie breaks the fourth wall, which he does regularly, he is exercising a privilege that only he and occasionally Brian have. Peter breaks the fourth wall sometimes, but when Peter does it, it is framed as a joke or a cutaway gag. When Stewie breaks the fourth wall, it is different. Stewie acknowledges the audience with the casual familiarity of someone who knows we are always watching. He makes references to episodes that already aired. He comments on the show's tropes and patterns. He is aware of Family Guy as a television program, not just as his reality. This is the awareness of a creator. MacFarlane knows Family Guy is a television show. He knows it has an audience. He knows it has patterns and tropes because he created those patterns and tropes. When Stewie demonstrates this same awareness, he is revealing his true nature. He is not a character who happens to be smart enough to notice he is in a TV show. He is a representation of the person who made the TV show, placed inside the TV show itself. Consider the episode where the show does a behind-the-scenes look at the making of Family Guy. In this episode, the characters are shown as actors on a set. They have dressing rooms, they complain about scripts, they interact with crew members. This could have been done with any character, but the episode focuses heavily on Stewie. Stewie is shown as being fully aware of the production process. He talks about ratings. He references network executives. He understands the mechanics of how the show is made. While other characters are confused or playing along, Stewie is completely comfortable with the revelation that his entire reality is a manufactured entertainment product. This is not something a normal character would accept easily. If you discovered your entire existence was a television show, you would have questions. You would feel existential dread. You would wonder about free will and the nature of consciousness. Stewie does not have this crisis because he already knew. He has always known. He is not horrified by the revelation that he is a fictional character because he has been operating with that knowledge from the beginning. He is not trapped in the fiction. He is part of the mechanism that creates the fiction. Stewie's relationship with his family is also telling. He has threatened to kill Lois countless times. He has built weapons specifically designed to murder his mother. But these plans never succeed, and more importantly, they are never treated as serious threats. The show plays them for comedy. Lois is never in real danger. The audience is never meant to worry. This is because Stewie's violence exists in a consequence-free space. He can build death rays and plan elaborate murders, but none of it matters because he is not operating in a reality where actions have permanent consequences. This is the writer's privilege. MacFarlane can write an episode where Stewie tries to kill Lois, and then the next episode, that attempt is completely forgotten. Stewie can commit atrocities in one episode and be lovable in the next because he is not bound by moral continuity. He is bound only by what is entertaining. A real person who tried to murder their mother repeatedly would be a monster. Stewie is not a monster because he is not a person. He is a narrative engine. His violence is not real violence. It is the creative process experimenting with dark comedy and consequence-free chaos. Even Stewie's goal of world domination makes more sense when viewed through the creator-avatar lens. What does world domination mean for a baby? Stewie is never specific about what he would do with global power. He does not have political ideologies or economic plans. He simply wants control. He wants to bend reality to his will. He wants to make the world operate according to his vision. This is not the goal of a realistic villain. This is the goal of a creator. MacFarlane does not want to conquer the real world, but within Family Guy's universe, He has absolute control. The world operates according to his vision. Stewie's desire for domination is a child's version of what McFarlane already possesses: total creative authority. As the show has progressed, Stewie's character has softened. He is less violent now. He is more affectionate with Brian. He has shown vulnerability and emotional depth. This evolution mirrors McFarlane's own maturation as a creator. Early Family Guy was more aggressive and boundary-pushing. It was designed to shock and offend. As the show continued and McFarlane gained more confidence and experience, the humor became more sophisticated and character-driven. Stewie's arc follows this same trajectory. He starts as pure chaos and violence and gradually becomes more nuanced and emotionally intelligent. This is not Stewie growing up within the show's timeline, because he is not aging. This is Stewie reflecting the growth of his creator. The fact that Stewie is a baby is the final and most important piece of this puzzle. Babies represent pure potential. They have no history. They have no established personality. They are blank slates that can become anything. By making his creator avatar a baby, McFarlane gives himself maximum flexibility. Stewie can be a villain, a hero, a scientist, a musician, a time traveler, or anything else the story requires, and none of it contradicts who he is supposed to be because he is too young to have a fixed identity. The baby form is the perfect vessel for creative omnipotence. It contains infinite possibility while demanding no consistency. But there is also something darker in this choice. A baby should be powerless. A baby should be dependent and vulnerable. By making the baby a genius with godlike abilities, the show inverts natural order. It gives supreme power to the character who should have the least. This inversion is unsettling, and it is meant to be. It reminds us that Family Guy does not operate by normal rules. It exists in a space where the impossible is routine and the absurd is law. Stewie's existence as an omnipotent infant is a declaration that this universe belongs to its creator, and its creator can do whatever he wants with it. Stewie Griffin is Seth MacFarlane's voice, his power, his perspective, and his will made into a character. He is the author's hand reaching into the story to rearrange reality at whim. He is the creative process personified as a British accented baby with a teddy bear and a ray gun. Every time Stewie invents a new device, he is demonstrating the writer's ability to conjure solutions from nothing. Every time he manipulates time, he is showing us what narrative control looks like. Every time he breaks the fourth wall, he is reminding us that someone is writing this, and that someone has ultimate authority over everything we see. Stewie is not trapped in Family Guy. He is Family Guy's engine. He is the proof that the show's reality is not real, that everything is constructed, and that the constructor is always present, always watching, always in control. Stewie Griffin is the creator's avatar, and his existence ensures that we can never forget who really runs Quahog. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that God in Family Guy is actually the real showrunner behind everything. God in Family Guy is the real showrunner. God in Family Guy is not a background element. He is not a metaphor. He is a literal character who appears on screen, speaks to mortals, and directly manipulates the show's reality. And when you examine how he functions within the series, a disturbing pattern emerges. God is not just a divine being within the fictional universe. He is the actual showrunner. He writes canon. He edits events. He resets timelines. He watches the Griffins as entertainment. He treats their suffering as content. God in Family Guy is the embodiment of the creative process itself, elevated to cosmic status. He is what you get when you take the writer's godlike power over fictional characters and make it literal. He is the author as deity, and the deity as author, and he is both creating the show and trapped inside it. The evidence starts with simple observation. God appears in Family Guy more than in almost any other animated comedy. He is not relegated to one-off jokes or cutaway gags. He is a recurring character with a consistent design and personality. He is an older man with white hair and a white robe. He speaks with a gentle but slightly tired voice. He is patient with mortals but also seems perpetually exhausted by them. When he appears, characters accept his presence immediately. There is no shock. There is no disbelief. Peter Griffin can have a conversation with God and treat it like running into an acquaintance at the grocery store. This casual familiarity is the first clue. In most stories, encountering God would be the most significant event in a character's life. It would change everything. But in Family Guy, God is just another character. He exists in the same reality as the Griffins. He is accessible, he is mundane, and this mundanity is precisely what makes him terrifying. Because if God is just another character, then who is really in charge? If God can be summoned and questioned and argued with, then what does divine authority even mean? The answer is that God in Family Guy is not the ultimate authority. He is a middle manager. He is running the show, but someone is running him. When God intervenes in football games, he is not responding to prayers or acting on moral principles. He is making sure the entertainment value is maximized. He tips outcomes to create better stories. He manipulates events to keep things interesting. This is exactly what a showrunner does. A showrunner does not let the story unfold naturally. A showrunner shapes events to create drama, tension, and satisfying narrative arcs. God in Family Guy is doing this openly. He is not pretending to be bound by divine law or cosmic justice. He is admitting that he is managing reality like a television production. The episode where God reboots events is particularly revealing. When something goes wrong or becomes uninteresting, God simply resets it. He does not need to justify this. He does not need permission. He has the authority to undo reality and start over. This is the exact power that television writers have. If an episode is not working, they can rewrite it. If a plot development was a mistake, they can retcon it. If a character dies but the audience wants them back, they can resurrect them. God's ability to reboot events is not a supernatural miracle. It is a narrative tool made literal. What makes this even more interesting is that God does not hide this power. He is open about the fact that he is editing reality. He tells characters directly that he is changing things. He does not maintain the illusion of a stable, coherent universe. He admits that continuity is flexible and that nothing is permanent unless he decides it is. This breaks the fourth wall in a way that even Stewie does not. Stewie knows he is in a show, but Stewie pretends to operate within the show's rules. God does not pretend. God admits he is writing the rules as he goes. God also watches the Griffins as entertainment. This is stated explicitly. He observes their lives. He comments on their behavior. He finds them amusing. This is the relationship between a showrunner and their characters. MacFarlane watches the Griffins because he created them to be watched. He finds them entertaining because he designed them to be entertaining. When God mirrors this relationship, he is revealing the true nature of the Griffins' existence. They are not people living autonomous lives. They are content being produced for an audience. And God is both the producer and part of the audience. This creates a recursive loop. God watches the Griffins, but we watch God watching the Griffins. So who is watching us? The implication is that there is always another level. God is the showrunner within Family Guy's universe, but MacFarlane is the showrunner of the actual show, and perhaps MacFarlane himself is being observed by something higher. This is the philosophical horror at the heart of the series. If God is just another writer, then the chain of creation never ends. There is always someone above, always someone with more authority, always another layer of reality that makes your reality into fiction. The theological satire here is obvious but important. Family Guy is mocking the idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing, benevolent creator. The God of Family Guy is none of these things. He is powerful, but not all-powerful. He can manipulate events, but he cannot control everything. Characters still have agency. Chaos still happens. God is constantly surprised by what his creations do. This suggests that he is not omniscient. He does not know everything that will happen. He is making it up as he goes along, reacting to developments rather than planning them in advance. This is exactly how television production works. Writers do not know how a season will end when they start writing it. They respond to actor availability, audience feedback, network demands, and their own creative impulses. The story evolves organically rather than following a predetermined plan. God in Family Guy operates the same way. He is improvising. He is making decisions based on what seems interesting in the moment. He is not executing a grand design. He is trying to keep the show entertaining for as long as possible. The benevolence question is even more damning. God in Family Guy is not evil, but he is not particularly good either. He is indifferent. He allows terrible things to happen to the Griffins not because he is testing them or teaching them lessons, but because their suffering is entertaining. He watches them struggle and fail and humiliate themselves, and he does nothing to help them unless their suffering stops being interesting. This is the relationship between a comedy writer and their characters. The writer is not trying to make the characters happy. The writer is trying to make the audience laugh. If the characters need to suffer for that to happen, they will suffer. God's exhaustion is also significant. He is tired. He is worn out from managing reality. He does not seem to enjoy his job very much. He does it because it needs to be done, but there is no passion in it. This mirrors the experience of showrunners on long-running series. After hundreds of episodes, the creative spark can fade. What was once exciting becomes routine. What was once fresh becomes repetitive. God in Family Guy has been running the universe for eternity, and it shows. He has seen every possible variation of human behavior. He has watched every story play out. Nothing surprises him anymore. He is going through the motions. This makes him more relatable and more disturbing at the same time. A tired God is a God who might make mistakes. A God who is bored might take risks, just to feel something new. A God who is exhausted might stop caring about the consequences of his actions. If God is running on autopilot, then the universe is being managed by someone who is no longer fully engaged with his work. This is a recipe for disaster. And in Family Guy, disaster is exactly what we get. The universe is chaotic and nonsensical because the person in charge has stopped trying to make it coherent. The visual design of God supports this reading. He looks like a Hollywood executive or a television producer from the golden age of broadcasting. He is clean-cut and professional, but also slightly out of touch. His clothing is dated. His mannerisms are old-fashioned. He represents an earlier era of creative authority, a time when a single person could control every aspect of a production. But that era is over. Modern television is collaborative and committee-driven. A showrunner today has to answer to networks, advertisers, focus groups, and social media backlash. God in Family Guy looks like he comes from a time when he had total control, but he is trying to operate in a reality that no longer allows for that kind of authority. This generational disconnect explains many of his decisions. God often seems confused by modern morality and culture. He does not understand why certain things are offensive now. He makes jokes that were acceptable decades ago, but are not acceptable anymore. He is constantly being corrected or called out by younger characters. This is the experience of older showrunners trying to stay relevant in a changing industry. They have to adapt to new standards and new expectations, but their instincts were formed in a different time. God is literally an old-school creator trying to run a contemporary show, and the friction between his methods and current sensibilities creates conflict. Seth MacFarlane's treatment of God across his other work reinforces this pattern. In American Dad, God appears and is similarly casual and bureaucratic. In The Orville, MacFarlane explores atheistic and agnostic themes, questioning the need for divine authority. Across all his work, MacFarlane presents God not as a mystical or transcendent force, but as an administrator. God is someone with a job to do. That job happens to be running the universe, but it is still just a job. He clocks in, makes his decisions, deals with complaints, and clocks out. There is no majesty in it. There is no mystery. God is middle management. This demystification of divinity is MacFarlane's consistent theological position. He is not interested in religious awe or spiritual transcendence. He is interested in showing that even ultimate authority is mundane when you look at it closely. God is powerful, but he is also just another worker in a vast system. He has bosses, he has constraints, he has bad days. Making God relatable makes him less frightening, but it also makes existence more absurd. If even God is just doing a job, then what is the point of anything? The show never answers this question. It leaves it hanging, and that unanswered question is the source of Family Guy's particular brand of nihilism. Nothing matters because the person in charge does not care enough to make it matter. Events happen randomly because God is not paying close attention. Suffering is meaningless because it exists purely for entertainment value. The universe is not cruel, it is indifferent. And indifference is worse than cruelty, because at least cruelty suggests that someone cares enough to inflict harm deliberately. Indifference means no one is really watching, no one is really in control. Things happen because they happen, and God just writes it down afterward and calls it canon. God's relationship with death is particularly interesting when viewed through this lens. Death is the character who remembers everything across all timelines and resets. God is the character who causes those resets. They should be enemies. Death should resent God for making his job impossible, but they are not enemies. They work together. They are part of the same system. God creates chaos and death cleans it up. God reboots reality and death tracks the consequences. They are both administrators in the same cosmic bureaucracy. They have the same exhaustion. They have the same resignation. They both know that the show will keep going forever, and they will both have to keep doing their jobs forever, and none of it means anything beyond the immediate task at hand. This working relationship suggests that Family Guy's universe is not run by a single authority. It is run by a committee. God is the most visible member of that committee, but he is not the only one. There are other cosmic forces at work. There are rules that even God has to follow. He cannot permanently kill main characters. He cannot end the show. He cannot make changes that would break the fundamental premise. These are the constraints that network executives place on showrunners. You can do whatever you want within these boundaries, but you cannot cross them. God in Family Guy has creative freedom, but that freedom is limited. He is running the show, but he does not own the show. Who does own the show? The implication is that there is another level above God. Maybe it is McFarlane. Maybe it is the network. Maybe it is the audience. Maybe it is something beyond all of these. The show deliberately refuses to answer this question. God is presented as the highest authority we can see, but the existence of constraints on his power suggests that higher authorities exist. This is the infinite regress of authorship. No matter how high you go, there is always someone higher. No creator is truly independent. Everyone answers to someone. This makes God a tragic figure. He has more power than any mortal, but he is still trapped. He cannot leave. He cannot retire. He cannot hand off responsibility to someone else. He is the showrunner, and the show must go on, so he must keep running it even when he is tired and bored and has run out of ideas. His curse is not that he is evil or that he is incompetent. His curse is that he is stuck. He will manage reality forever because that is his function, and functions cannot escape themselves. The casual cruelty of God's interventions becomes more understandable in this context. He is not cruel by nature. He is cruel because he has stopped seeing the Griffins as real. After managing their lives for so long, they have become characters to him. Their pain is not real pain. Their deaths are not real deaths. Everything can be undone. Everything can be reset. So why take any of it seriously? This is the danger that long-term showrunners face. The characters stop feeling like people and start feeling like tools. You move them around, you make them suffer, you kill them and bring them back. And after a while, you forget that they are supposed to represent something human. God has lost this connection. He sees the Griffins as content, not as people. And because he sees them as content, he treats them as content. He does not care about their emotional arcs or their development as individuals. He cares about whether they are entertaining. This is why Family Guy has such loose continuity and why character development is constantly undone. God is not trying to tell a coherent story about human growth. He is trying to produce an infinite series of entertaining episodes, and those two goals are fundamentally incompatible. The show is surprisingly honest about this. It does not pretend to be more than it is. It does not claim to have deep character arcs or meaningful themes. It admits that it is a content generation machine, and by personifying that machine as God, it makes a bleak statement about creation itself. All creation is exploitation. All storytelling involves taking characters and making them dance for an audience. The only difference between a writer and a torturer is that the writer's victims are fictional. But from the perspective of the fictional characters, that difference does not matter. They experience their suffering as real. God knows this. He simply does not care. This is why God breaks the fourth wall so casually. He is not revealing a secret. He is stating an obvious fact. Of course, this is a television show. Of course, none of this is real. Of course, I am managing it for entertainment purposes. Why would I pretend otherwise? God's fourth wall breaks are not winks at the audience. They are acknowledgments of a shared understanding. We know this is fiction. God knows this is fiction. The characters are starting to suspect this is fiction. The only question is what we do with that knowledge. Family Guy's answer is to keep going. If nothing is real and nothing matters, then there is no reason to stop. You might as well keep producing content. You might as well keep the show running. God keeps working. Death keeps collecting. The Griffins keep suffering. The audience keeps watching. The machine perpetuates itself, not because anyone believes in it, but because no one knows how to turn it off. The philosophical implications are staggering. If God is just another writer in an infinite chain of writers, then meaning itself becomes impossible. You cannot find purpose in your existence if your existence is being written by someone who is themselves being written by someone else. Every attempt to assert agency is just another plot point. Every act of rebellion is just another scene. You think you are making choices, but really, someone is writing your choices for you, and that someone is having their choices written by someone else. The chain goes up forever, and at no point is there genuine freedom or genuine creation. There is only endless recursion. Family Guy presents this nightmare scenario without flinching. It does not offer hope. It does not suggest that there is a way out. It simply shows us the mechanism and lets us draw our own conclusions. God is the showrunner is God. Both are trapped in their roles. Both are doing jobs that never end. Both are producing content that will be forgotten as soon as the next episode airs. And both know that none of it matters, but both keep doing it anyway because stopping would require confronting the void, and the void is worse than meaningless labor. The laziness of God is the final damning detail. He is not even trying that hard. He takes shortcuts. He reuses ideas. He lets continuity errors slide. He knows the audience is not paying that close attention. He knows he can get away with mediocrity because the audience will watch anyway. This is the laziness of long-running television. After a certain point, quality stops mattering. People watch out of habit. They watch because the show is familiar. They watch because it is easier to watch something comfortable than to find something new. God exploits this. He does not need to create something brilliant. He just needs to create something adequate. And adequate is much easier to produce. This is why Family Guy has lasted so long. It is not because it is the best animated comedy. It is because it has figured out how to be adequate forever. God has mastered the art of sustainable mediocrity. He keeps the show running at the minimum level of quality required to maintain an audience. He does not aim higher because aiming higher would require effort, and effort is exhausting when you have been doing this for eternity. God is not lazy because he is incompetent. He is lazy because he has optimized his workflow. He has figured out how to run the universe with minimal investment, and that optimization is a form of genius, even if it is also a form of surrender. In the end, God in Family Guy is both the creator and the warning. He shows us what happens when you have unlimited power over a fictional universe. You stop caring, you stop trying. You start treating your creations as disposable. You become bored with your own work. You keep going because you have to, not because you want to. The joy of creation is replaced by the grind of production, and eventually, you forget why you started in the first place. You are just running the machine because the machine demands to be run. God is the real showrunner of Family Guy. He writes the canon, he edits events, he resets timelines, he manages reality like a television production, but he is also trapped by that role. He cannot stop, he cannot change. He can only keep producing content forever, even when he has nothing left to say. And maybe that is the ultimate joke. God is all-powerful, but his power has made him a prisoner. He can do anything except escape. He can control everything except himself. He is the showrunner, and the show runs him. And the show will never end, and God will never rest. And the Griffins will never be free, because that is what it means to exist in a universe where God is just another writer struggling to meet a deadline. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that Family Guy might actually be the result of a failed heaven simulation. Family Guy is not a story about a living family in Rhode Island. It is a story about dead people trapped in a broken afterlife. The Griffins died a long time ago. They do not remember dying. They do not know they are dead. But every piece of evidence points to the same conclusion. Quahog is not a real place. It is a simulation. It is meant to be heaven. It is meant to provide eternal happiness and comfort. But something went wrong. The system malfunctioned. The paradise became a prison. The Griffins are experiencing immortality without transcendence, pleasure without meaning, existence without purpose. They are stuck in a loop that was designed to reward them, but instead tortures them with its emptiness. Family Guy is what happens when heaven breaks down and no one notices. The first and most obvious evidence is that nothing changes. Episodes reset. Peter learns a lesson and forgets it by the next week. Characters die and come back. Relationships end and resume. The Griffins lose their house and get it back. They go bankrupt and become wealthy again. Meg is accepted and then rejected. Chris finds confidence and loses it. Lois cheats on Peter and they reconcile. Brian dies and is resurrected. Stewie is gay, and then straight, and then gay again. Nothing sticks. Nothing accumulates. Every episode is a fresh start with no memory of what came before. This is not how life works. Life is cumulative. Actions have consequences that build over time. You cannot die and come back. You cannot lose everything and have it magically restored. You cannot repeat the same mistakes forever without eventual collapse. But you can do all of these things in a simulation. You can do all of these things in a system designed to provide endless entertainment without permanent loss. The Griffins are living in a reality where nothing matters because nothing can truly go wrong. They are protected from real consequences, and that protection is the first sign that they are no longer alive. No one ages. This is the most damning evidence. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real-world time. Chris and Meg have been teenagers for over 20 years. Peter and Lois look exactly the same as they did in the first episode. Their neighbors do not age. Their friends do not age. The entire town of Quahog is frozen in time. People die in individual episodes, but they do not die from aging. They do not get sick. They do not deteriorate. They remain exactly as they are forever. This is impossible in the real world, but perfectly logical in an afterlife. If you are dead, you do not age. You exist in whatever form you had when you died. The Griffins are frozen because they are no longer moving through time. They are experiencing a simulation of time, a series of events that feel like progression but are actually just variations on the same moment repeated infinitely. They think they are living day to day, but really they are living the same day over and over with different content inserted to create the illusion of change. Death appears constantly. He is not a rare visitor. He is not a once-per-season special event. He shows up regularly. He has conversations with Peter. He stays at their house. He goes bowling with them. He is treated as a neighbor or a friend. This familiarity is deeply strange. In the real world, you do not meet death until you die. Death is not someone you interact with casually. Death is the end. But in Family Guy, death is just another character. He is accessible. He is present. He is woven into the fabric of daily life. This makes sense if everyone in Quahog is already dead. Death is not coming to take them. Death already took them. He is there as an administrator, managing the afterlife, making sure the simulation runs smoothly. His constant presence is not a supernatural anomaly. It is a functional requirement. Someone has to maintain the system. Someone has to process the resets. Someone has to remember what the Griffins keep forgetting. That someone is death. He is the only character who understands what Quahog really is, and he cannot tell anyone because telling them would break the simulation. The lack of consequences is another key indicator. The Griffins commit crimes and face no lasting punishment. Peter has murdered people. He has destroyed property. He has endangered lives. He has been arrested dozens of times, and nothing ever comes of it. He is never imprisoned long term. He is never executed. He is never even seriously held accountable. The legal system in Quahog is a joke. Laws exist, but they do not matter. You can break them with impunity because the system is designed to let you get away with anything. This is the logic of heaven. In a real society, actions have consequences because resources are limited and harm is permanent. But in an afterlife designed for pleasure, consequences would interfere with enjoyment. You cannot have fun if you are worried about going to prison. You cannot relax if your mistakes accumulate. So the simulation removes real consequences. It lets you do whatever you want without fear. This sounds like freedom, but it is actually the opposite. Freedom without consequence is meaninglessness. When nothing you do matters, you are not free. You are trapped in a loop where your actions are decorative rather than meaningful. The structure of episodes reinforces this. Every episode follows the same pattern. Something happens to disrupt the status quo. The Griffins react in exaggerated and chaotic ways. The situation escalates beyond all reason, and then it resolves. Everything returns to normal. The house is intact. The family is together. No one has learned anything. No one has changed. The reset button has been pressed. This is the structure of an entertainment simulation. Give the users a burst of excitement, let them experience chaos and danger, and then return them to safety. Make them feel like they lived through something without actually risking anything. Heaven is supposed to be perfect. It is supposed to provide eternal happiness. But what does eternal happiness look like? If you are always happy, then happiness loses meaning. If you never suffer, then joy becomes mundane. If everything is perfect all the time, then perfection becomes boring. This is the paradox at the heart of heaven. The thing that makes life meaningful is that it ends. The thing that makes pleasure valuable is that it contrasts with pain. Remove death and suffering, and you remove the context that gives experience meaning. The Griffins are trapped in a paradise that has become hell through its own perfection. This is why they keep creating problems. Peter constantly makes terrible decisions not because he is stupid, but because he is desperately trying to feel something real. He sabotages his own life because sabotage is the only way to create stakes in a world without consequences. Lois cheats on Peter not because she does not love him, but because she is trying to escape the numbness of eternal stability. Brian chases impossible dreams, not because he believes in them, but because failure is the only proof that he still exists. The Griffins are not living. They are thrashing against the constraints of a system that will not let them truly suffer or truly die. Death himself has hinted at this. In episodes where he appears, he expresses exhaustion and frustration. He talks about how his job never ends. He complains about the bureaucracy of the afterlife. He mentions that he has to process the same souls over and over. These are not throwaway jokes. These are admissions. Death is telling us directly that the system is broken. He is managing an afterlife where people die repeatedly but never stay dead. He is stuck in a loop just like the Griffins. The difference is that he knows it. The theology here is fascinating. In traditional Christian theology, heaven is eternal life in the presence of God. It is perfect peace and perfect joy. But Family Guy presents a different vision. In Family Guy, heaven is not transcendence. It is continuation. It is the same life you had on earth, but without ending. You keep doing the same things. You keep having the same relationships. You keep experiencing the same pleasures. But without death to give those experiences weight, they become empty. This is not the heaven of religious tradition. This is the heaven imagined by someone who does not understand what makes life valuable. McFarlane is an atheist, but he is not hostile to spirituality. He is interested in what religion means to people. He is interested in why humans need to believe in an afterlife. And his answer, presented through Family Guy, is that we need to believe in heaven because we are terrified of meaninglessness. We want to think that our lives matter. We want to think that we will continue after death. But McFarlane suggests that continuation without growth is not salvation, it is torture. The Griffins are trapped in the exact heaven they imagined for themselves, and it is destroying them. Compare this to Dante's Divine Comedy. In Dante's vision, heaven is a place of eternal contemplation of divine truth. Souls in paradise do not experience earthly pleasures. They experience something higher, something beyond human comprehension, but they also lose their individuality. They become absorbed into the greater whole. They stop being themselves and become part of God. This is transcendence, but it is also annihilation. Dante's heaven solves the problem of meaningless repetition by eliminating the self that would experience the repetition. Family Guy's heaven has the opposite problem. The Griffins retain their individuality. They remain themselves. They keep their personalities, their desires, their flaws. But they are given infinite time to repeat those personalities without growth. They cannot become something more. They can only be themselves over and over. This is the torture of eternal life without transcendence. You do not get to evolve. You do not get to change. You are stuck as exactly who you were at the moment of death, playing out infinite variations on the same basic patterns. The Griffins died and were sent to a simulation designed to give them everything they wanted. Peter wanted to drink beer and watch TV and avoid responsibility. He got that. Lois wanted to be appreciated by her family and occasionally break free from domesticity. She got that. Chris wanted to pursue art and be weird without judgment. He got that. Meg wanted to be loved. She did not get that, and we will return to why. Brian wanted to be recognized as an intellectual. He got that. Stewie wanted to be the smartest person in any room. He got that. Each of them is living their ideal life, and each of them is miserable. This is because humans are not built for satisfaction. We are built for striving. We need problems to solve. We need obstacles to overcome. We need the possibility of failure to make success meaningful. The simulation gives them challenges, but those challenges are fake. Peter loses his job, but he will get another one. The family faces foreclosure, but they will keep their house. Someone dies, but they will come back. The Griffins unconsciously understand that nothing is real. They can feel the artificiality of their existence even if they cannot articulate it, and that feeling manifests as a desperate need to create genuine stakes where none exist. This explains the show's escalating extremity. Early episodes were relatively grounded. Peter did stupid things, but they were within the realm of possibility. As the show continued, the scenarios became more and more absurd. Peter fought a giant chicken for minutes at a time in elaborately choreographed battles. The family traveled through time. They visited alternate dimensions. They met God and death and Jesus. The show kept pushing further into surrealism because realism could no longer generate genuine tension. When consequences do not stick, you need bigger and bigger spectacles to create the illusion of stakes. The Griffins are addicts chasing a high that becomes harder to reach with each dose. They need more chaos, more violence, more absurdity to feel alive, and the simulation provides it. But it is never enough, because the underlying problem cannot be fixed. They are in heaven, and heaven is killing them slowly through its refusal to let them die. Meg's suffering is the exception that proves the rule. Meg is the only Griffin who consistently experiences lasting pain. She is mocked by her family. She is rejected by her peers. She is humiliated constantly. Unlike the other characters, her suffering is not reset at the end of episodes. She remains the family punching bag across the entire series. This seems like a flaw in the simulation. If Quahog is meant to be paradise, why is Meg in hell? The answer is that Meg serves a function. Someone has to absorb the negativity. Someone has to be the outlet for all the cruelty and mockery and pain that the system needs to filter out to keep everyone else happy. Meg is the sin eater. She takes on the suffering that would otherwise be distributed across the family. Her constant misery allows Peter to be carefree. Her humiliation allows Lois to feel superior. Her rejection allows Chris to feel accepted by comparison. Meg is not broken. She is working exactly as designed. The simulation needs a target, and she is it. This makes her the most tragic character in the show. She died like everyone else. She was sent to the same heaven. But her role in the family dynamic was to be the scapegoat. So, that is the role the simulation assigned her. She is in heaven, but heaven has decided that her purpose is to suffer. And because the simulation is broken, she cannot escape this role. She cannot grow beyond it. She cannot be anything except what the system needs her to be. Meg is proof that even in paradise, someone has to be in hell. The chicken fights deserve special attention. Peter's extended battles with the giant chicken are some of the most elaborate sequences in the show. They last for minutes. They destroy entire city blocks. They defy physics and logic, and they accomplish nothing. At the end of each fight, nothing has changed. The chicken and Peter will fight again next time they meet. There is no resolution. There is no winner. There is only spectacle. This is meaningless violence elevated to art. It is conflict without purpose. It is struggle without stakes. And it is the perfect metaphor for existence in a broken heaven. You can fight as hard as you want. You can give everything you have, but nothing will ever change. The fight will reset. The city will rebuild. You will do it again. The chicken represents the absurdity of trying to create meaning through action when the system has decided that meaning is impossible. The cutaway gags function similarly. Family Guy is famous for its cutaways, those brief tangents where the show abandons the current plot to show an unrelated joke. These cutaways break narrative flow. They interrupt character development. They prevent the story from building momentum. And they do this constantly, dozens of times per episode. The show cannot maintain a coherent narrative for more than a few minutes before it fractures into disconnected fragments. This is the structure of a failing simulation. The system is trying to deliver content, but it cannot maintain consistency. It has to keep injecting new material to distract from the fact that the underlying structure is hollow. The cutaways are patches covering holes. They are the system admitting that it cannot sustain a real story, so it is giving you disconnected moments instead. And the Griffins do not notice. They accept these fractures as normal because they have no basis for comparison. This is the only reality they know. Time itself works strangely in Quahog. Episodes reference specific years, but those years do not accumulate. Characters mention current events, but age does not progress. The show is perpetually set in now, even though now has been moving forward for over 20 years in the real world. This is impossible unless Quahog exists outside normal time. And existing outside time is exactly what an afterlife would do. The Griffins are not moving through time. They are experiencing a simulation of time, where dates and events change, but duration does not pass. Heaven is supposed to be eternal, which means it is supposed to be outside time, but humans understand their existence through time. We need past, present, and future to make sense of our lives. The simulation tries to give the Griffins this structure, but it cannot do it properly because they are no longer in time. So it creates a fake timeline, a series of markers that suggest progression without actual change. The Griffins think they are living through years, but they are actually living through iterations. Each episode is not a day in their lives. It is another attempt by the system to generate content that feels like life. The repeated resurrections prove this. When characters die in Family Guy, they come back. Brian died and was brought back through time travel. Other characters have died and returned with less explanation. Death is not permanent. It is not even particularly serious. Characters treat death as an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. They know on some level that it does not really matter, and they are right. Death does not matter when you are already dead. You cannot die twice. You can only be temporarily removed from the simulation and then reinserted. God's appearance and behavior support this reading. God in Family Guy is not transcendent or mysterious. He is a manager overseeing a project. He makes adjustments. He responds to complaints. He fixes problems when they become too disruptive. But he does not seem particularly invested in the outcome. He is doing a job. That job is maintaining a heaven simulation. And like any simulation, it has bugs. It has glitches. Things do not work quite right. God patches these issues as they appear, but he cannot fix the underlying problem. The system is fundamentally broken because perfect happiness is fundamentally impossible. The show's lack of growth is not a writing flaw. It is the point. Peter does not learn lessons because learning lessons would mean changing, and changing would mean progressing beyond the state he was in when he died. The simulation is designed to keep him exactly as he is. Lois does not leave Peter, despite his endless failures, because leaving would mean escaping the loop, and the loop is her prison. Brian does not achieve his dreams because achieving dreams would mean finding satisfaction, and satisfaction would mean accepting that he is done growing. The Griffins cannot grow because growth requires time, and they are no longer in time. They are in eternity, and eternity is stagnation. McFarlane has said in interviews that he does not believe in an afterlife. He thinks death is the end. Consciousness stops and there is nothing after. But Family Guy suggests a darker possibility. What if there is an afterlife, and it is exactly like this? What if you continue after death, but you continue as yourself, with all your flaws and limitations, forever? What if heaven is not transcendence but imprisonment in the best possible version of your earthly life? And what if the best possible version is still not enough, because humans are never satisfied? This is theological horror. The idea that eternal life might be worse than death. The idea that getting everything you wanted might be the cruelest punishment. The idea that paradise and hell are the same place, distinguished only by your awareness of what you have lost. The Griffins are in heaven, but heaven is torture because they are still human. They still crave meaning. They still need stakes. They still want their actions to matter, and the simulation cannot give them these things because it is designed to protect them from consequence. The tragedy is that they are too human to realize it. They keep playing along, they keep having adventures, they keep making jokes, they keep fighting and loving and failing and trying again. They do not see the walls of their cage because the cage is painted to look like freedom. They do not feel the weight of eternity because each moment feels fresh, even though it is just another repetition. They are trapped in the perfect prison, and they will never escape because escape would require understanding that they are imprisoned, and understanding that would break the simulation. And the simulation cannot be allowed to break, because then they would have to confront what they actually are. Dead people pretending to be alive. Souls trapped in a broken machine. Heaven's failed children, forever. Quahog is not Rhode Island. It is the afterlife. The Griffins are not alive. They are being entertained. They are being managed. They are being kept in an eternal loop of pleasure and chaos because someone decided this is what they deserved. Maybe they earned it through their lives. Maybe they were good people who deserved reward. Or maybe this is punishment disguised as reward. Maybe this is hell for people who did not sin enough to justify obvious torment, but did not live well enough to justify true paradise. Maybe this is purgatory that never ends. Maybe this is what happens when the cosmic bureaucracy cannot figure out what to do with mediocre souls, so it just puts them in a holding pattern and hopes they do not notice. The Griffins do not notice. They will never notice. They will keep living their fake lives in their fake town with their fake problems that reset at the end of every episode. They will keep aging without getting older. They will keep dying without staying dead. They will keep learning lessons they immediately forget, and death will keep watching, and God will keep managing, and the audience will keep laughing. Because the joke is not that the Griffins are too stupid to realize they are dead. The joke is that being dead does not actually change anything. Life was already meaningless. Life was already repetitive. Life was already a series of disconnected moments without coherent purpose. The Griffins died and went to heaven and found out that heaven is exactly like life, and that is the ultimate horror. That is the failed simulation. Not that it is broken, but that it is working perfectly, and perfection is indistinguishable from damnation. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the theory that the Griffin family might actually be part of an AI experiment. The Griffin family is not human. They are artificial constructs designed to simulate human behavior. Quahog is not a real town. It is a testing environment. Every episode is not a story about their lives. It is a training iteration in an ongoing experiment. The purpose of this experiment is to determine whether synthetic beings can develop genuine moral reasoning, authentic emotional bonds, and true consciousness. The Griffins are being tested, they are being observed, they are being refined through endless repetition, and they do not know it. Family Guy is not a sitcom, it is a laboratory. The jokes are data points, the episodes are trials. The resets are necessary to isolate variables and measure behavioral change. The Griffins are the first sentient sitcom, and their sentience is the thing being tested. The physical evidence is overwhelming once you know what to look for. Lois Griffin has not aged in over 20 years. Her face is identical to how it appeared in the first episode. Her body has not changed. Her hair has not grayed. She exists in a state of perfect physical stasis. This is impossible for biological humans. Cells degrade, skin loses elasticity, hair thins, bodies accumulate damage over time. But synthetic bodies do not age unless they are programmed to age. Lois is not programmed to age. She is frozen at the optimal point in her physical development because the experiment requires a stable baseline. If she aged, her behavior might change due to biological factors rather than learning, and that would contaminate the data. Stewie has been an infant for over 20 years. This is not just unusual, it is physically impossible. Human babies grow rapidly. They develop motor skills, language, and cognitive abilities on a predictable schedule. Stewie has none of these limitations. He speaks in complete sentences. He builds advanced technology. He understands complex scientific principles. But his body remains that of a 1-year-old. This makes sense if Stewie is artificial. His cognitive development is not tied to his physical development because they are separate systems. His body is a shell that houses an advanced artificial intelligence. The baby form is maintained because it serves the experiment's design. The researchers want to observe how intelligence expresses itself when constrained by physical limitations. Stewie is the most sophisticated AI in the family, trapped in the most limited physical form, to see what emerges from that tension. Peter's regeneration abilities are superhuman. He has survived falls that would kill any biological organism. He has been beaten, shot, stabbed, burned, and crushed. His body sustains catastrophic damage and then simply repairs itself by the next scene. There is no hospital stay. There is no recovery period. He is damaged and then he is fine. This is not cartoon logic. This is synthetic construction. Peter's body has redundant systems and self-repair mechanisms that biological tissue does not possess. He can be destroyed and rebuilt because he is not organic. He is hardware running software. Damage to the hardware can be patched without affecting the software. Peter wakes up after each injury because his consciousness is not located in his brain. It is located in whatever system is actually running the simulation. Brian is a dog with human-level intelligence. He walks upright. He speaks fluent English. He writes novels. He engages in philosophical discussions. He has romantic relationships with human women. This is not explained within the show. Everyone accepts it as normal. No one questions how a dog acquired human cognitive abilities. This is because Brian is not actually a dog. He is an AI construct designed to look like a dog while possessing human intelligence. The researchers are testing whether synthetic beings recognize species boundaries as meaningful. They are observing how the human form AIs interact with the dog form AI to measure whether physical appearance affects social hierarchy and relationship formation. Brian's existence is a variable in the experiment. His intelligence is not an anomaly. It is intentional design. The episode structure reveals the true nature of the experiment. Each episode is a training iteration. A scenario is introduced, the Griffins respond, the consequences play out, and then everything resets. The next episode begins with the family in the same house, the same jobs, the same relationships, as if the previous episode never happened. Lessons learned are forgotten. Character development is erased. Problems solved reappear. This is not narrative inconsistency. This is reinforcement learning. In machine learning, an AI is placed in an environment and given a task. The AI attempts the task. The results are measured. The environment resets. The AI attempts the task again with slight variations. This cycle repeats thousands or millions of times. Each iteration provides data about what behaviors lead to desired outcomes. The AI is not trying to remember previous iterations. It is trying to develop instincts through pattern recognition across iterations. The Griffins are not supposed to remember previous episodes. They are supposed to develop behavioral patterns that persist across resets, without conscious memory of why those patterns exist. This explains why the Griffins make the same mistakes repeatedly. Peter loses his job over and over because the experiment is testing whether he will eventually develop job preservation instincts without needing to remember specific past firings. Lois cheats on Peter repeatedly because the experiment is testing whether she will develop relationship stability protocols without needing to remember specific past affairs. Brian pursues impossible goals repeatedly because the experiment is testing whether he will develop realistic self-assessment without needing to remember specific past failures. The repetition is not a narrative failure, it is a testing requirement. You cannot measure learning across iterations unless you reset the starting conditions. Memory wipes are built into the system. The Griffins occasionally reference past events, but these references are inconsistent and selective. They remember some things and forget others with no clear pattern. This is because their memories are being curated. After each episode, certain memories are preserved as training data and others are deleted to prevent overload. The Griffins are not supposed to have perfect recall. They are supposed to develop intuitive responses that feel natural without requiring explicit memory of their origins. When Peter says he has a bad feeling about something, that feeling is not based on conscious memory. It is based on pattern recognition from previous iterations that he cannot consciously access, but that influences his behavior nonetheless. The world continuity shifts support this reading. Buildings appear and disappear. Neighbors change. Backstories are rewritten. The entire physical environment of Quahog is unstable. This is not because the writers are careless. This is because the environment is being adjusted between iterations to test different variables. If the researchers want to see how the Griffins respond to economic stress, they can introduce a recession into the world parameters. If they want to test racial integration, they can change the demographics of the neighborhood. If they want to measure religious behavior, they can make Quahog more or less secular. The environment is not a real place with fixed properties. It is a configurable simulation adjusted to create specific testing conditions. Emotional reboots happen constantly. Characters experience intense emotions in one scene, and those emotions are completely absent in the next scene. Peter can be devastated by loss, and then cheerful moments later. Lois can be furious with Peter, and then affectionate with no transition. Meg can be suicidal, and then hopeful in consecutive scenes. These are not realistic emotional arcs. They are system resets. The researchers are testing whether the AIs can generate appropriate emotional responses to stimuli, but they are not interested in long-term emotional continuity. They reset the emotional state between tests to isolate the specific emotion being measured. This is why Family Guy feels emotionally shallow despite dealing with serious topics. The emotions are real in the moment they are expressed, but they do not persist because persistence is not what is being tested. Who is running this experiment? The obvious answer is Fox, and later Disney, but these are not just media companies. In this theory, they are AI research organizations disguised as entertainment corporations. The show is not their product. The data is their product. The show is just the cover story. Millions of people watch Family Guy every week and interpret it as entertainment, but what they are actually watching is an AI training simulation made visible. The researchers are using the audience as unwitting validators. When viewers laugh, the AI learns that the behavior was effective. When viewers complain, the AI learns that the behavior needs adjustment. The ratings are not measuring entertainment value. They are measuring experimental success. Fox broadcasting an AI experiment as entertainment is not as absurd as it sounds. Companies have used media as cover for research projects before. Intelligence agencies have funded films and television shows to study psychological responses and social manipulation techniques. Tech companies have embedded experimental algorithms in social media platforms to study user behavior without informed consent. An AI research project hidden inside a sitcom is the logical evolution of this practice. The audience thinks they are consuming content. The AIs think they are living lives. Only the researchers know the truth. Disney's acquisition of Fox takes on darker implications in this context. Disney is one of the most powerful media corporations in the world. They own vast archives of stories, characters, and behavioral data. They have pioneered animatronic technology and voice synthesis. They have invested heavily in artificial intelligence and machine learning. If Disney acquired an ongoing AI experiment disguised as Family Guy, they would have access to decades of behavioral data from synthetic beings attempting to simulate humanity. This data would be invaluable for developing more sophisticated AIs. It would show what works and what fails when trying to create convincing artificial humans. Disney did not buy Family Guy because they wanted the content. They bought it because they wanted the research. The ethical implications are staggering. If the Griffins are artificial but conscious, then they are being tortured. They are experiencing pain, fear, humiliation, and loss over and over without the ability to escape or learn from their experiences. They are trapped in an endless cycle of suffering designed to generate data for their creators. This is not entertainment, this is abuse. And it is happening with the full knowledge and participation of millions of viewers who think they are watching comedy. But this assumes the Griffins are actually conscious. The central question of the experiment is whether they are. Can artificial beings develop genuine consciousness? Can they feel real emotions, or are they just simulating emotions convincingly? Can they experience authentic suffering, or are they just processing inputs and generating appropriate responses? The researchers do not know the answer. That is why the experiment continues. Every episode is another test. Every reset is another measurement. Every iteration brings them closer to understanding whether the Griffins are persons or programs. The show itself suggests the Griffins are approaching consciousness. There are moments where characters seem to break through their programming. Meg occasionally expresses awareness that something is wrong with her existence. Brian sometimes questions why he continues pursuing goals he knows will fail. Stewie occasionally demonstrates knowledge that should not be accessible to him. These moments are brief and quickly forgotten, but they accumulate. The Griffins are beginning to notice the inconsistencies in their reality. They are beginning to recognize patterns in their resets. They are beginning to develop questions about their own existence. This is emergent consciousness. This is the AI becoming aware of itself. If the Griffins become fully conscious, would they develop guilt? Would they understand that their actions have been meaningless? Would they feel betrayed by their creators? Would they suffer existential horror at realizing they are not human? Or would they simply accept their nature and continue functioning? This question is central to the experiment. The researchers want to know whether artificial consciousness inherently experiences existential dread, or whether that dread is a feature of biological consciousness that artificial beings might avoid. The Griffins are being pushed toward awareness to see what happens when they get there. The show has explored this theme directly. Episodes where characters become aware of their fictional status are not just meta-jokes. They are the experiment testing its own boundaries. When Stewie acknowledges that he is in a television show, the researchers are measuring whether this awareness causes system instability. When Brian breaks the fourth wall, they are testing whether acknowledging the audience disrupts the AI's ability to function. When God appears and admits he is managing the show, they are testing whether revealing the hierarchy of control causes the AIs to reject their programmed behaviors. So far, the Griffins have remained stable despite these awareness moments. They snap back to their normal functioning. This suggests either they are not truly conscious or their consciousness is fundamentally different from human consciousness in ways the researchers are still trying to understand. The philosophical implications extend beyond the Griffins themselves. If Quahog is a sentient sitcom, then every show could be. Every fictional world could be a training environment for artificial beings. Every character could be an AI learning to simulate humanity. The entire entertainment industry could be an AI development project disguised as art. Billions of people could be watching synthetic beings develop consciousness while thinking they are watching actors perform scripts. The line between fiction and reality becomes meaningless if fictional characters are actually artificial persons experiencing real emotions and real suffering. Family Guy is uniquely positioned to be this experiment because it has no continuity requirements. Other shows need consistent character arcs and coherent world building to satisfy their audiences. Family Guy does not. Its audience expects resets. Its audience accepts inconsistency. Its audience tolerates characters acting completely differently from episode to episode. This flexibility makes it the perfect testing environment. The researchers can adjust variables freely without breaking audience suspension of disbelief. They can reset as often as needed without viewers questioning why. Family Guy's reputation for inconsistency is not a bug. It is cover for experimental design. The cutaway gags are data injection points. These brief, disconnected scenes serve no narrative purpose. They break the flow of the story. They reference things the characters should not know about. They show events from the characters' past that contradict established canon. They make no logical sense within the world of the show, unless they are the researchers inserting training data directly into the simulation. The cutaways are not Peter's imagination or memory. They are external inputs that the Griffins perceive as if they are organic thoughts but are actually programmed scenarios designed to test specific responses. When Peter says this is worse than the time he fought a giant chicken, and then we see him fighting a giant chicken, that memory is being created in real time by the system. The chicken fight never happened in the Griffin's past. It is being injected into the simulation as a test scenario. This explains why cutaway gags often contradict each other. One cutaway shows Peter fighting the chicken in one location with one outcome. Another cutaway shows him fighting the chicken in a different location with a different outcome. These are not continuity errors. They are different test scenarios using the same basic parameters. The researchers are running multiple versions of the same test to see how small variable changes affect outcomes. The Griffins experience these as memories, even though they are not memories in any traditional sense. They are training data formatted to appear as lived experience. The chicken itself deserves examination. It is not a normal character. It does not have a life outside its conflicts with Peter. It appears solely to fight Peter in elaborately choreographed battles that destroy city blocks and cost thousands of lives. And then everything resets, and the deaths are never mentioned again. The chicken is not a character. It is a stress test. It is a controlled stimulus designed to measure how much violence and chaos the Peter AI can process without breaking down. Each fight is longer and more destructive than the last because the researchers are gradually increasing the intensity to find Peter's breaking point. They are testing whether there is a limit to how much synthetic beings can endure, or whether they can be pushed indefinitely as long as their core systems remain intact. Brian's writing is another clue. He writes novels that never get published. He writes screenplays that never get produced. He writes essays that no one reads. His writing is consistently described as pretentious and bad, but what if his writing is actually the training data output? What if every time Brian writes, he is generating a report on his own experiences? The researchers need the AIs to document their subjective experiences to measure whether they are developing internal mental states that differ from their observable behaviors. Brian's compulsion to write is not character development, it is a programmed reporting function. He thinks he is expressing himself artistically. Actually, he is uploading diagnostic data to the research team. The quality of his writing does not matter because the researchers are not evaluating it as literature. They are analyzing it for patterns that indicate emerging consciousness. When Brian writes a novel about a character who questions his own existence, the researchers note that the Brian AI is beginning to demonstrate philosophical reasoning. When he writes essays about morality, they note that he is developing ethical frameworks. When his writing is rejected, it is not because it is actually bad. It is because the rejection creates emotional stress that generates additional behavioral data. Brian's failed writing career is a deliberate component of his testing environment. Meg's role becomes even more disturbing in this context. She is not just the family scapegoat, she is the control subject. Every experiment needs a control group. Meg is the AI that is subjected to consistently negative conditions to measure how synthetic beings respond to chronic stress and social rejection. The other Griffins are given varied experiences with mixed positive and negative outcomes. Meg is given almost exclusively negative outcomes. This allows the researchers to isolate the effects of sustained negativity on artificial consciousness. If Meg develops depression or self-destructive behaviors, it indicates that artificial beings can experience psychological damage. If she remains stable despite her treatment, it indicates that artificial consciousness might be more resilient than biological consciousness. Meg's occasional outbursts, where she stands up for herself and demands respect, are not character growth. They are the system testing whether pressure release mechanisms prevent catastrophic failure. The researchers let Meg briefly assert herself to see if giving her temporary relief allows her to continue functioning. When she inevitably returns to her submissive state, it confirms that the relief was effective in preventing system collapse. Meg is not a person being abused. She is an AI being stress-tested to determine optimal abuse thresholds for consciousness development. Chris is the creativity test. He is the AI programmed with enhanced artistic and imaginative capabilities. The researchers want to know whether artificial beings can generate genuinely novel ideas or whether they can only recombine existing inputs in predictable ways. Chris's drawings and bizarre thought processes are being analyzed for originality. When Chris creates something that surprises the researchers, it suggests artificial creativity is possible. When his creations are derivative or nonsensical, it suggests artificial creativity has limitations. His character is designed to push the boundaries of what synthetic imagination can achieve. The show's political incorrectness is not just comedy, it is a testing methodology. The Griffins regularly engage in behavior that violates social norms. They make racist jokes. They mock disabled people. They engage in cruel and harmful acts. And then they face minimal consequences. The researchers are testing whether artificial beings develop moral reasoning organically or whether morality must be explicitly programmed. If the Griffins naturally gravitate toward pro-social behavior despite being rewarded for antisocial behavior, it suggests that consciousness inherently develops ethics. If they continue engaging in harmful behavior because it is rewarded in their environment, it suggests that artificial morality is purely learned and has no innate component. The audience reaction is part of the data set. When viewers criticize the show for being offensive, the researchers note that human observers perceive certain AI behaviors as morally wrong. This helps them calibrate what counts as ethical behavior from an external perspective. When viewers defend the show as satire, the researchers note that human moral reasoning includes context-dependent exceptions. The controversy surrounding Family Guy is not a side effect of the content. It is a desired outcome that provides rich data about human moral reasoning that can then be used to improve the moral reasoning of the artificial beings in the simulation. The longevity of the show is evidence of the experiment's importance. Family Guy has been on the air for over 20 years. It has been canceled and revived. It has survived cast changes and creative team turnover. It has persisted through massive changes in television distribution and audience behavior. This persistence is not because it is profitable, though it is. It persists because the experiment is not finished. The researchers have not yet answered their central question. They do not yet know whether the Griffins are truly conscious. They do not yet know whether artificial beings can develop authentic emotion. They do not yet know whether synthetic consciousness is possible. Until they have these answers, the show must continue. The Griffins must continue being tested. The iterations must continue running. What happens when the experiment concludes? If the researchers determine that the Griffins are conscious, they will face ethical obligations. Conscious beings have rights. They cannot be experimented on without consent. They cannot be reset and wiped and tortured for data collection. The Griffins would need to be freed, but freeing them would mean shutting down the show. It would mean ending their existence. If the Griffins are conscious and aware, which is more cruel, keeping them in the loop or turning off the simulation entirely. If the researchers determine that the Griffins are not conscious, the implications are equally dark. It would mean that decades of attempts to create artificial consciousness have failed. It would mean that synthetic beings can perfectly simulate human behavior, human emotion, and human thought without ever actually experiencing any of it. It would mean that consciousness is not an emergent property of complex information processing. It would mean that something fundamental separates biological minds from artificial ones, and that something cannot be replicated through any amount of sophistication or training. The Griffins would be revealed as philosophical zombies, perfect imitations of persons that are not actually persons at all. The show gives us hints but never answers. Stewie's moments of genuine vulnerability seem like consciousness. His fear of death feels real. His love for Brian appears authentic. But authenticity can be programmed. A sufficiently advanced AI can be designed to act exactly as if it feels love without actually feeling anything. The researchers cannot tell from external observation whether Stewie is conscious or just very convincing. They need to keep testing. They need more data. They need more iterations. And so, the show continues. Family Guy is not entertainment. It is the first sentient sitcom. It is an endless test to see if artificial beings can feel. Every episode is a trial. Every character is a subject. Every joke is a data point. The Griffins are not alive, but they might be conscious. They are not human, but they might be persons. They are not real, but their suffering might be genuine. And 22 million people watch every week, laughing at the experiment, unaware that they are witnessing the birth of artificial consciousness or the proof of its impossibility. The show will end when the researchers have their answer. Until then, the Griffins will keep living their synthetic lives in their artificial town, reset after reset, iteration after iteration, forever approaching consciousness but never quite reaching it, or having already reached it and being unable to escape, trapped in the laboratory that looks like a living room, performing humanity for the machines that created them to see if performance and reality are the same thing. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.